So every 5 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture comes out with new guidelines, and we just put up a video over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program that talks about how the Trump administration, in this insanely corrupt deal with the $100 billion industry of ultra-processed, high-sugar, high-salt, high-fat foods that is literally killing 700,000 Americans a year, has said, oh, we're going to change the guidelines so that these fast food, high-processed food companies can shovel their stuff into our school lunch programs, into our kids. We're going to change the guidelines so people aren't informed about the importance of, dialing back somewhat on meat and on salt and sugar and all these other things. It's nuts. You can check the whole thing out over at thomhartmann.com. Look for the video for our, the supporters of our program at thomhartmann.com. It's 9/11, and you probably noticed that the corporate media is talking about the victims of 9/11, which is an appropriate thing to do. Almost 3,000 people died here in the United States, tragically, and we mourn their loss. But they're not talking about the hundreds of thousands of Afghanis and Iraqis who died. Hundreds of thousands in each country, millions who were displaced, had their lives turned upside down, destroyed in both those countries by unnecessary wars, by an unnecessary war in Afghanistan. Recall, the Taliban actually offered to arrest bin Laden and turn him over to a third country for trial. And George Bush said, no, I'd rather have a war. And then, of course, Dick Cheney lied us into the war in into Iraq, And Halliburton, which he had been the CEO of and a major stockholder in, had been on the verge of bankruptcy when Cheney became vice president. And suddenly they're getting all these contracts without even asking for them. Literally no bid contracts. You don't have to submit a bid. You just get the money. And Halliburton is now, a very, very wealthy company, and Dick Cheney is now a very, very wealthy man. And somehow all of that seems to be completely missing from the corporate media. And there's huge lessons there that we need to learn. Here on Free Speech TV, you'll hear a little more than just the pablum that the media is putting out, that the corporate media puts out. And that's why you need to call right now and support this network and support this show, hopefully. But any show on this network, let's keep them all going. 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV needs your help. And the only way, literally, the only way that this network can keep going is if you call and make a contribution. With a $20 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann. Actually, I think we're changing the bumper sticker from the Thom Hartmann 2020 bumper sticker. We're going to replace that with Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. And because I'm really not, running for president or anything. Anyhow, that's with a $20 gift. With a $50 gift, we've got the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag, which is a nice canvas tote bag. With a $100 gift, the Free Speech TV Any Functional Adult, right? As opposed to Trump. We'll take any functional adult. And the size is small through XX large. With a $150 gift, you get an autographed copy of my new book, Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. That's going to be shipped. It's going to take a few weeks to ship, but you'll get that. With a $250 gift, we're doing a virtual meet and greet. And so, if it's difficult for you to travel, or you'd rather not travel, or, whatever, if you don't want to come to Portland, we can meet online and have a conversation. We'll get, a bunch of people together and just do it as a video conference. You'll be able to see me. I won't be able to see you, but I'll be able to hear you. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland, hang out with us for the last hour of the show, and we'll go have lunch together. It'll be nice. We've done this a lot. We've got some folks coming by this Friday, day after tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to that. So, anyhow, those are the premiums. But beyond the premiums, there's this whole, larger point that while progressive politicians are really starting to make a dent. I mean, look at the Squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the most famous of the four How, people are like really excited about these folks. The two progressive candidates who are not taking any corporate dollars for President of the United States, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, between the two of them, they have 40% of the primary vote locked up right now. And, I mean, you can add up all of the other candidates and they don't reach that. So that's pretty impressive. And where is the progressive media, right? The progressive politicians are taking off. They're really doing well. The progressive media, it's us. I mean, maybe you've got, one or two progressives who show up on, for example, MSNBC, but there's also Republicans all day long and conservatives and toadies from the Reason Foundation that Charles Koch helped start in Page 4. I mean, it's like, really? So if you want actual information, if you want real news, if you want to know what's really going on, this is the place, Free Speech TV. This is the place where you'll actually find out what's going on in the world. This is where we fill in all the missing pieces of the puzzle. We color in the gray areas and bring the picture into stark relief. We tell the stories that are not being told by corporate media. We give you a solid feel for what's actually happening in America and what's happening, basically what the sentiment is on the street. That is how average Americans think and feel, because they're calling into this program constantly and sharing their thoughts. And, the whole spectrum. I mean, I debate conservatives. We put callers on regardless of their political perspective. You really genuinely get to hear the whole spectrum and watch and listen to me trying to model how to have reasonable discussions and arguments, frankly, with some of these folks. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And happy Wednesday, 9/11. Oh my God, it's 9/11. We'll be talking about that as we continue through the program today in our second and third hour. But for our first hour, it's Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan is on the line with us. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. His website is pocan.house.gov, P-O-C-A-N. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. Congressman, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
So, I guess, politically speaking, we had an election in North Carolina, the 9th District last night. The returns came in last night, and this was the. Oh, and I should add, by the way, you're here for the hour taking calls from people. I guess that was implicit in Middays with Mark, but I should say it for new callers, new listeners. If you would like to speak with Congressman Pocan, our telephone number is 202-808-9925. But back to that thought, last night we had this race, and Dan Bishop, the Republican, won it, but by a squeaker. And this was also the race where the previous Republican candidate had hired a guy to go around and take people's absentee ballots and throw them away or mark them up or whatever if they voted for a Democrat. So anyhow, what are your thoughts on this, and what does this tell you about what might be happening in 2020?
Yeah, so, this is a district where I think the president won by 12 points. The fact that this was a super narrow race, again, seeing a double-digit shift, shouldn't be of great surprise that we didn't win the district. Our candidate ran against an assault ban, weapons assault ban, against the Green New Deal, against a few other things that maybe most of us in the Democratic Party support. But I think it is something that we have to be careful that others don't try to say, oh, they called him a socialist and that's why we lost. Because I think the fact that he didn't support an assault ban or the Medicare for All or some of these other issues also could be reasons why maybe we didn't get more of our votes out. And I think it's something that will be used by people trying to make a lot of prognostications about next year. But at the end of the day, I think the prognostication that we should all be able to agree on is it shifted by double digits because Donald Trump isn't doing well still. So
McCready, the Democrat who was running, was not a progressive. He was what you might call a corporate Democrat, or the media likes to call them centrists.
I think he was running more as a centrist. But I think, we've seen a little bit of chatter already, people saying he lost because he was called a socialist in certain places, where I would also point out I've seen other places where they mentioned he didn't support some of the things that the Democratic base really supports. And at the end of the day, I mean, it still was a huge uphill climb, a minus 12 district there for what Trump won, but it still moved 10 points, and that's significant, and that's what we saw last fall with congressional elections. I think I saw a stat somewhere between 30 and 40 Republican districts have a smaller Trump performance than this district, so it still, I think, bodes well for going to next year, but I want to make sure we don't allow the centrist in the Democratic Party to try to spin this as the socialism somehow worked, when I would argue maybe some of the issues that were talked about weren't bringing out some of the voters we needed to bring out.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective that is completely absent from the analysis that I've seen on both of the two cable news networks. Okay, well, shall we pick up phone calls here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's go for it. Middays with Mark, your calls for Congressman Pocan. Russell in Oak Lawn, Illinois. Hey, Russell, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call, Tom. Mr. Pocan, I'm hearing that you guys, the Democrats, you guys got to replenish the money that Donald Trump took from the military. He wants you to bring up the allocation, more money for it. Are you guys, is that a dead issue? Because why? He's just going to take it if you, replenish the money. He'll probably steal it anyway. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, Russell, so first of all, there's no way we're replenishing the money. It's not just like we're giving him that money. I think one of the things that's being looked at is a resolution of disapproval from Congress. See if Republicans will support taking money from their districts, from military schools and housing and other programs for the wall or not. And we're trying to look at other ways through the appropriations process we can still affect this. So we are not giving up on this at all. We're not backfilling the money. And when the president said that originally, he knew he was lying, but I'm sure that doesn't shock anyone.
James in Northbrook, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman Pocan. My question is, I think that the Democrats are missing a huge opportunity to work more with the media for purposes of pushing with great zeal their message. The problem is, the Democrats are right, but as everybody knows, the era of Trump being right is not sufficient. You have to get that message out there so people are enthusiastic and they run forward. So my question is, what do you think about the idea of more of the congressional representatives working with and being on more shows of people with the kind of energy like Thom Hartmann? Like, I hate to say it, I mean, a great example is like Rush Limbaugh and Hannity. We need other people out there to not just describe the correct information, but to present it in a way that really gets people enthusiastic.
Yeah, James, we do that. In fact, there's an effort. Many of our members are going on Fox because some of their programs have quite high viewership, especially during the day. And, people are reaching out. I think one of the perennial problems I've had since I've been in Congress, and quite honestly, since I've probably been in the state legislature back in Wisconsin, was the mainstream media reports what it reports, but, you have 22 minutes to sell detergent, and they don't always cover the breadth of issues, the things that we've passed, the 239 or 237 bills that we've passed already in the House of Representatives. Mitch McConnell sitting on the vast majority of them. They still want to ask us about impeachment. The big story for the last couple of days is, are we in an investigation or an inquiry? They want to write about semantics rather than substance. And it's just a problem we've had. That's why I love programs like Tom's, because you talk about weighty issues and you have an intelligent conversation, but we don't often get that in some of the other venues. But we actually have a lot of people going on all those programs, and we make an effort to go on those programs.
Jeff in Fort Dodge, Iowa. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, hi, Congressman. I'm hearing that Joni Ernst and my senators Chuck Grassley are just outraged at the Trump administration and his EPA about these 31 exemptions to these refineries for blending fuel. Weren't those the people that put the EPA director in that position? Wasn't Scott Pruitt confirmed by both Grassley and Ernst? And we've got farmers that are out here in Iowa that just don't understand what's happening to them. Could you explain this, please?
Yeah, Jeff, you're exactly right. I think, the moral of the story is if you keep a rattlesnake as a pet, you're eventually going to get bit. And in this case, they all sold their souls in backing Donald Trump and any crazy idea he puts forward because they don't want the base mad at them. But when that crazy idea devastates the farm economy in Iowa and Wisconsin and a lot of other corn-growing states because of the president's actions through the EPA, then, they're upset, but they're the ones who were the enablers that caused this to happen. So I think, you need to take that back to folks in Iowa that, it's Ernst and Grassley that have really created this problem. They won't stand up to the president. They won't stand up to him on tariffs that are also hurting your farmers and my farmers. And I think, be very aggressive with that message because in the last election, supposedly 70% of farmers voted for Donald Trump, yet they're really being hurt on so many fronts, especially corn growers. We need to make sure we're relaying that.
Omar in Herndon, Virginia, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good day to you, Tom. Good day to Mr. Pocan. Just FYI, I have recommended to Elizabeth Warren campaign when she got elected that, Tom, you're going to be either Labor Secretary or the Environment Secretary. And Mr. Pocan, is going to
no interest, Omar, but what's your question for Congressman Pocan?
Mr. Pocan is going to be the Health Secretary. My question is that how secure is that election in 2020 in spite of what happened in 2016? Thank you.
Yeah, we have a lot of concerns. So not only did we pass H.R. 1, which is the most comprehensive election, campaign finance, and ethics law bill ever passed in Congress, but we also sent a bill that just very strategically with the scalpel addressed the concerns we have about Russia or anyone else interfering in our elections, and Mitch McConnell's sitting on him, which is why I think, he has earned the title Moscow Mitch. If he thinks it's more important to protect Russia via the president, protect the president via what Russia did, then he has to live up to it. And if he's not going to take up a simple measure that would protect our elections, then he has to pay the price. And actually everyone in the Senate who doesn't support that should have to pay that price. It should be a no-brainer. Unfortunately, we right now are operating in a world of no-brainer.
It's 16 minutes past the hour. Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Congressman Mark Pocan every week coming on and taking your calls for the hour at 202-808-9925. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. His website, pocan.house.gov, and his Twitter handle is Rep, as in Representative Rep Mark Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Representative Pocan is also the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the big cheese in Washington, D.C. We'll be back. And welcome back. And, I guess for somebody from Wisconsin, Big Cheese is a great title, huh?
Yes, it is.
There you go. Okay. Jared in Pennsylvania, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Tom, and hello, Congressman Pocan. I'm calling about the issue of the war in Afghanistan and how it is now on its 18th year in October. Why is it that Congress is not looking at the real funders of the Taliban and why they exist, namely Saudi Arabia, which has on record been documented funding the Taliban, and the U.S. funds Saudi Arabia, so by proxy we are funding the Taliban through Saudi Arabia. And another thing is the documents about 9/11, that of the unclassified documents about the Saudi involvement in 9/11. And I'd like to take this comment off the air.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to answer a little more generally, Jared, which is just this morning we did have a meeting, a caucus meeting, a speakers meeting, and we had a presentation about what's going on with Afghanistan and Taliban. And I think the part that really came out to me, there's been some ongoing conversations, obviously, to try to resolve what's going on there. And Donald Trump probably blew it up with what he did last week once again by him trying to be too clever by half to try to have some kind of a deal for 9/11. the way he handled it probably set us back in trying to get things done. And that's part of the problem with Donald Trump. Sure, Bolton was never good for the country in the position he was in, but Donald Trump goes through advisors like crazy because he doesn't take advice, and he also doesn't know what he's doing because he doesn't seem to read or intellectually have a capacity to look at these issues. So for him trying to get ratings by cutting a deal the week of 9/11, he may have set us back quite a bit in trying to get something done.
David in Greenfield, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you for taking my call. Last night I was watching the Rachel Maddow show, the election results coming in, and McCready against Bishop in the 9th District. Mm-hmm. And between the minute of 11 in the show and 14 minutes into the show, McCready lost 38,000 votes and Bishop lost 27,000 votes. And it seemed like an election anomaly, and I know that Congressman Pocan is into this, and I was wondering if he would look into it.
Yeah, David, my guess is it was just something that they posted that wasn't correct, because nowhere else have we seen anything with an actual anomaly, and it could just be how they post numbers on the screen. So I'll take a look at it, but I've seen this happen before, and sometimes when they post things. So I wouldn't necessarily automatically assume that it was anything. It's more how networks all rush to beat each other to put numbers out. But I will definitely take a look.
If there was a question, this is the kind of stuff that H.R. 1 would address, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. But, I think something like that where both of them lost tens of thousands of votes would really stand out and been noticed, as opposed to a few hundred votes shaving off or something.
Yeah. Well, my point was that people might be more trusting of the numbers if we actually had, good election integrity.
And even the very targeted bill around Russia would provide more confidence.
Yeah, amen. We'll be right back with Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. It's Middays with Mark. Welcome back. Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour here on 9/11. Jack in North Carolina, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom. I've listened to you a long time. I'm an FDR liberal that lives in North Carolina. I'm also a veteran. I'm the son of World War II veterans. And both my brothers are also veterans. And I think one thing you got to realize about McCready, which I was really in favor of, unfortunately I'm not in that district. I would have worked a hell of a lot more for him, but he was a veteran, and also although he is a business person, his main business was putting in solar farms. So he's the kind of candidate that, honestly, I wish the rest of North Carolina could be like Chapel Hill and Asheville, where I've lived, which are liberal, but there's parts of the states that are so inured to this Jesse Helms attitude that's thrived here literally since the Civil War in some of the agrarian areas of the state. So running someone that is a moderate Democrat may work there. At the same time, though, how can we as Democrats work to get the FDR values of progressive politics into places like this? I'd really like to know what you and Mr. Pocan would think about that.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, Jack, so I think a big part of it is you can be a moderate running in a district, but you should at least understand some progressive populist issues around economics, because that's where the public's at. And, I think when the people are trying to spin right now this socialist rhetoric, we know it's never worked in history, right? They did it when they did Medicare, Social Security. It's never worked. So we shouldn't start buying something gullibly by people who want us to change what the party's about. We know where the leading presidential candidates are right now. The progressive vote combined is stronger than not within the Democratic Party. But in a district like this, maybe it's not a good idea to take a anti-universal health care stance or an anti-climate change stance, and especially if someone's got a background in that solar area. you probably have more of an ability to be a strong voice on that. And I think we just have to look at all of that, but especially those pocketbook issues where people talk about at their kitchen table. They're worried about paying for their rent or mortgage, having insurance for their family. Can they take a family vacation? We need to talk about those core issues, those core populist progressive issues, because that is how you get more voters to be backing us. And I just think, again, you can be a moderate on many issues, but don't forget those core issues that people have progressive populist beliefs in. If we forget that, then we make a mistake.
So just to clarify, McCready did not support the Green New Deal, did not support Medicare for All, did not support student loan debt relief. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about the student debt relief. I know the other one was assault ban, which I could see maybe in some areas of North Carolina, right?
He did not support that.
But I do think, though, that, again, having a message where you're not on the right side of these issues. I mean, climate change is we have a vast majority of people who believe that issue with us. We need to then work and talk about that issue. And I think right now, again, the spin around socialists being the reason is a spin that certain people want to put out there for a reason.
Yeah, I got it. Michael in Miami, Florida, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to talk with me. I'd just like to ask Mr. Pocan if he'd like to give a shout out to Ilhan Omar, who today said some people did something. What do you have to say for yourself?
Yeah, I don't think she said that today, for one. And two, I get your point. You've done a good job. You can get your Fox points for the day, and good luck.
Okay. Let's see here. Caroline in New York City. Caroline, you're on the air. Caroline, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan, Caroline.
This is Carolyn Tinney. I'm from New York. The question has to do with Greta Thunberg, who is in our country at this time. And my question is whether the U.S. Congress is inviting her to speak to Congress. She has spoken to several parliaments in the EU. This is an incredible opportunity to have her come before our Congress and speak. And I'm just wondering if there's
great
any
question. We're up against a break here. Let's let Congressman Pocan respond.
Yeah, Kellen, I can't speak to the full Congress, but I know they are trying to bring Greta in to testify before the Climate Change Special Select Committee and another committee, a subcommittee that deals directly with global climate change. So we are trying to bring her into Congress right now, and I talked to Bill Keating just this past few days about that, so I know that's in progress.
That's remarkable. Are you guys, we just have 20 seconds here, are you guys doing anything around the September 20th student movement to be out in the streets about climate change?
I know my schedule this week. I don't even know past that. Sorry.
Okay. No, I meant Democrats in the House more generally, but apparently, well, we'll find out. Congressman Mark Pocan is taking your calls for the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. It's Middays with Mark. His website is pocan.house.gov. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Middays with Mark on 9/11 here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the 18th anniversary. We'll be right back. It's 9/11, and you probably noticed that the corporate media is talking about the victims of 9/11, which is an appropriate thing to do. Almost 3,000 people died here in the United States. Tragically, and we mourn their loss, but they're not talking about the hundreds of thousands of Afghanis and Iraqis who died, hundreds of thousands in each country, millions who were displaced, had their lives turned upside down, destroyed in both those countries by unnecessary wars. By an unnecessary war in Afghanistan. Recall, the Taliban actually offered to arrest bin Laden and turn him over to a third country for trial. And George Bush said, no, I'd rather have a war. And then, of course, Dick Cheney lied us into the war in into Iraq, And Halliburton, which he had been the CEO of and a major stockholder in, had been on the verge of bankruptcy when Cheney became vice president. And suddenly they're getting all these contracts without even asking for them. Literally no bid contracts. You don't have to submit a bid. You just get the money. And Halliburton is now, a very, very wealthy company, and Dick Cheney is now a very, very wealthy man. And somehow all of that seems to be completely missing from the corporate media. And there's huge lessons there that we need to learn. Here on Free Speech TV, you'll hear a little more than just the pablum that the media is putting out, that the corporate media puts out. And that's why you need to call right now and support this network and support this show, hopefully. But any show on this network, let's keep them all going. 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV needs your help. And the only way, literally, the only way that this network can keep going is if you call and make a contribution. With a $20 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann. Actually, I think we're changing the bumper sticker from the Thom Hartmann 2020 bumper sticker. We're going to replace that with Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. And because I'm really not, running for president or anything. Anyhow, that's with a $20 gift. With a $50 gift, we've got the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag, which is a nice canvas tote bag. With a $100 gift, the Free Speech TV Any Functional Adult, right? As opposed to Trump. We'll take any functional adult. And the size is small through XX large. With a $150 gift, you get an autographed copy of my new book, Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. That's going to be shipped. It's going to take a few weeks to ship, but you'll get that. With a $250 gift, we're doing a virtual meet and greet. And if it's difficult for you to travel, or you'd rather not travel, or whatever, if you don't want to come to Portland, we can meet online and have a conversation. We'll get a bunch of people together and just do it as a video conference. You'll be able to see me. I won't be able to see you, but I'll be able to hear you. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland, hang out with us for the last hour of the show, and we'll go have lunch together. It'll be nice. We've done this a lot. We've got some folks coming by this Friday, day after tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to that. So anyhow, those are the premiums. But beyond the premiums, there's this whole larger point that while progressive politicians are really starting to make a dent. I mean, look at the Squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the most famous of the four. How people are like really excited about these folks. The two progressive candidates who are not taking any corporate dollars for president of the United States, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, between the two of them, they have 40% of the primary vote locked up right now. And, I mean, you can add up all of the other candidates, and they don't reach that. So that's pretty impressive. And where is the progressive media, right? The progressive politicians are taking off. They're really doing well. The progressive media, it's us. I mean, maybe you've got, one or two progressives who show up on, for example, MSNBC, but there's also Republicans all day long. And conservatives and toadies from the Reason Foundation that Charles Koch helped start and pays for. I mean, it's like, really? So if you want actual information, if you want real news, if you want to know what's really going on, this is the place, Free Speech TV. This is the place where you'll actually find out what's going on in the world. This is where we fill in all the missing pieces of the puzzle. We color in the gray areas and bring the picture into stark relief. We tell the stories that are not being told by corporate media. We give you a solid feel for what's actually happening in America and what's happening, basically what the sentiment is on the street. That is how average Americans think and feel, because they're calling into this program constantly and sharing their thoughts. And, the whole spectrum. I mean, I debate conservatives. We put callers on regardless of their political perspective. You really genuinely get to hear the whole spectrum and watch and listen to me trying to model how to have reasonable discussions and arguments, frankly, with some of these folks. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you. Welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. And Sam in Estes Park, Colorado. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Great. Your
Good,
question
Sam.
for Congressman Pocan.
Well, it's kind of something for both of you to think about as far as the Democratic Party and the Democratic debates and what we should be talking about. And I know it seems like a minor thing, but the whole Democrat Party slur that gets thrown around, how come it seems like the Democrats never fight back against that?
Yeah, when people say Democrat Party on this show, I say there is no such thing as the Democrat Party. It's the Democratic Party. It was Joe McCarthy in the 1950s who launched a campaign to get Republicans to refer to it as the Democrat Party. And he said, and always put the emphasis on the rat. Congressman?
Yeah. There's a lot of things they do, and we need to respond to better. I think the one that I'm most concerned about right now is this. I think there are some in the corporate world here in D.C. that want to play up the socialist thing, even though we know throughout history it has been used poorly against Democrats, whether it be during Medicare or Social Security. Multiple times in history, they've said, oh, this is a socialist concept, and trying to use it as a boogeyman, and it's never worked. The problem is they're doing that again because Republicans are using that term, the president uses that term, and I think if we start to actually buy the rhetoric, we could be taking some wrong turns looking at 2020. So the one I'm really watching the most, Sam, and I'm most concerned about is people, how they respond to all the rhetoric around socialists. Instead, we just need to call the Republicans out for what they do or more accurately don't do. Like on healthcare, a good example. I think in that last debate, people were arguing more about dotting I's and crossing T's than saying for the last 2.5 years, Republicans have tried to dismantle the Affordable Care Act, take away people's protections with pre-existing conditions. And when you really talk about that, people understand what the alternative is. And too often we let them put the word out and we respond rather than being aggressive against their actual actions. So that's what I'm most worried about, Sam, personally, when it comes to semantics.
Stan in Champaign, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thanks, guys, for taking my call. First of all, I want to apologize to the congressman last time for my anger. This is my second call to the program, and last time I was pretty irritated by something I heard the congressman say, and that is Medicare for all. I heard the congressman say that Medicare for all would do away with all payroll taxes, including the taxes on the employer, and therefore the employer would be able to hire more people and raise wages. And that sounds an awful lot like trickle-down economics as was started by Reagan. And I think that if we have Medicare for all that does not have a corporate or rather employer payroll tax involved, we will lose at least a third of the people that now support Medicare for all. What do you think?
Yes, Stan, I think, we're better to test something like that because I think just throwing out a third, it sounds like it's the effort that went into it, right? We're just making a guess on it. And I think the concept, again, the value that everyone should have access to health care is where we need to be because people agree with us on the value. Once you start to pick apart the exact details and even more so the funding mechanisms, it's easy. That's what distractors do. And I don't want us to get distracted from the big concept. We have a plan that works right now called Medicare. And I think that's why many of us have tried to build off of that. but let's not get lost on funding mechanisms and things like that. Let's instead elevate the value, which is where we win, that why shouldn't every person in America have access to quality health care? If you're actually sick, you shouldn't be barred because you have a pre-existing condition. You say that, and you actually bring in just about everybody. You bring in large majorities of people, and from there, we have the rest of the conversation. So, again, so often conservatives throw little details out there as if that's the plan to try to sidetrack us and to try to kill something. We can't take the bait. I think where we need to be is on that higher value of healthcare access for everyone. But to your specific proposal, Stan, whenever there's an idea, we need to test it to see what people think. But I think you're overestimating the number based on what you're asking.
Jim in Saratoga Springs, New York. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, thanks for letting me on. I'm concerned about noise pollution, especially from loud motorcycles, because they're the worst offenders, and it relates indirectly to health care and quality of life. Congressman Pocan supported, he's backing House Bill 255, which makes it harder for the police to ticket loud motorcycles, and I'm kind of disappointed with that.
Congressman?
Jim, I have no idea what 255 is, to be perfectly honest. There's about 5,000 bills introduced, but I'll take a look at it. I just don't know. I don't remember us taking up something about motorcycle noise, so I'll have to take a little closer look.
Sadru in Bolingbrook, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, good afternoon or good morning. But my question is, or rather my frustration is that Nancy Pelosi does not want to impeach this guy in the White House. When is it going to be the right time? When he's blown up the world, and then we're going to sit down? Because we won't be around. I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Sadhu, I think it's probably a not accurate characterization to say she doesn't want to impeach him. I think she has said she thinks he's done impeachable crimes. I think what she's been very clear on over and over is that in order for us to prove this, that you can actually get the support you need in the House and the Senate, we need to get the witnesses forward. And right now the president's blocking witnesses, whether it be related to the Mueller report, which I think has been the 800-pound gorilla, but now more and more, issues around the emoluments clause in his facilities in Ireland and in Scotland and his hotel in D.C. and around his taxes and some other issues. So I think what they're doing today in judiciary was actually doing the formal vote about starting the impeachment, not starting, but the impeachment investigation, supporting that. We've already started that before we left on break. I think now that seems to be the term that is used instead of inquiry as investigation. It seems to be the same term, but we're using investigation now. But I don't believe that Nancy has said she doesn't want him impeached. In fact, I think just the opposite. She's saying if you're going to impeach him, you have to have support beyond just the Democrats when you get to the Senate, and that means we need to get these witnesses to come. And right now, Donald Trump's been blocking them, so we have to use the legal system to get them so that we can actually take that vote and be successful.
Art in Farrington, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman Pocan. I can't believe that you guys laughed and called 9/11 a Fox News and a Republican talking point. You people are fucking...
Oh, that's enough of that. Thank you for punching. We just beeped that out, so presumably nobody heard that. If anybody did, my apologies. And we'll go back and check our call log and make sure that caller's blocked in the future. George in Chicago, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Congressman, I'd like you to connect up a few bits, I think, that together mean something significant. There's this mass exit of Republicans from the House who don't want to face the voters again. And one of them is your colleague, Mr. Sensenbrenner, who I think will have like 40 years in when he leaves in January. And the fact that there was a story a couple days ago that farm bankruptcies are at an all-time high in Wisconsin, coupled with Republicans not having had regular town halls with their voters. Is this indicative of possibly a huge blue wave in the next election where the the voters are just going to have so many grievances against Republicans that they'll vote Democratic this time?
Boy, George, let me answer it a couple ways. I do think, especially when it comes to the farm economy, whether it be the tariff issue, whether it be the EPA's actions about reformulated fuels using ethanol, which is corn, which is grown in Wisconsin and throughout the upper Midwest. There's a lot of people who I think voted for Trump who aren't real happy right now, and I think that's going to have an impact. What I'm seeing really in a lot of the people running, some of them are in swing districts, and they just don't want to go through this again. Some of them are people that are your more traditional Republicans in the more traditional way the party was, and they're not happy in their party, but they're also not going to stand up, so they're just choosing to leave, and we're watching that be a part of the numbers too. And we beat a lot of the moderates in the last election when we took the majority. So what you're seeing is a Republican Party that doesn't look like your traditional conservative political party. Instead, it looks a bit more like a cult of Donald Trump, and they'll do whatever he wants and says, and those who don't like that, they find a quiet way to leave rather than speaking out. And I think that's what I've noticed from the bigger trend of people leaving right now, which is sad because that means, people who, may have been the more traditional Republicans you could work with, disagree on some things, agree with another, aren't sticking around.
Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for him in just a moment. His website is pocan.house.gov, pocan.house.gov, and his Twitter handle is Rep, as in Representative, Rep Mark, M-A-R-K, Pocan. You can. He's also the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program, your media support group for we, the people of the United States of America. And welcome back, Scott, in Detroit, or Pontiac, Michigan, I guess. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, good afternoon, Tom. I'm actually in Oxford, Michigan, and thank you for taking my call. Congressman Pocan, thank you for allowing me to talk to you. It's an honor. One of the things that I've been seeing lately on TV is a lot of ads from local unionized groups like the fire department, claiming that single payer is bad, right? Medicare for all is going to be bad. Well, being that labor, that's their kind of their linchpin in negotiations. Is there anything going on in the House to help strengthen labor unions, but also give them more of a platform in things like a 32-hour work week or better wages and wage protections?
Other things than health care that they can offer as benefits to their employees, in other words.
Exactly.
Yeah, Congressman?
Right. Yeah. Great question, Scott. And there's a couple major initiatives. There's a bill that I do expect to pass this fall that would help unions in many ways around collective bargaining rights and strengthening our ability to have labor law work for workers. And that will pass the House of Representatives. There's also another bill that Bernie Sanders and I have introduced that goes even a little farther that would go towards car check and a few other things that we think is important. So there certainly are provisions around that. I think my conversation I would have with any labor leader, and I'm a member of a union for 3 decades, and I work very closely with labor here. That's where my passions are, is that we can't, just because of the attacks on labor, one of the things that they have fought for well for people have been better wages and benefits. If everyone has health care, that allows you then to fight for other better benefits, whether it be retirement or pay. And we shouldn't lose focus on that. Everyone will have the boat lifted up if we have a universal healthcare system, a single-payer system, and they still have a very strong role in fighting for people's wages and working conditions against employers who all too often aren't living up to what they should. So unions can be strong, and everyone can have healthcare. That is not at all incompatible, and we need to pass more protections for unions to be able to give workers a voice in their workplace, and I think we can do both.
Justin in Portland, Oregon, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. We have just a minute to the break, Justin, too, if you can make it a quick one. Justin?
This is Jeff. Is it?
Oh, Jeff, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're on the air.
No. Okay, Tom. Good day, guys. Thanks for taking my call, Tom and Congressman Pocan, and thank you both for this public service. This being 9/11, I'd like to mention Richard Clark. He's the man whose many warnings of an impending attack were ignored completely by Bush, Cheney, and other members of that administration. But Mr. Clark now works in the private sector as a cybersecurity expert. He's been on MSNBC recently talking about the insecurity of our elections. I think he'd be an excellent expert to invite before Congress. Anyway, Congressman Pocan, my question is, would you push for a national vote-by-mail system like we have here in Oregon? I believe we need easily accessible hand-counted paper ballots.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff, I think it's worth exploring because one of the things I've watched, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Maine used to have the highest turnout in the country for presidential elections. We just had it because we have same-day registration. We made it easier for people to be able to vote. But what you're doing in Oregon has been an interesting experiment. We're watching your vote participation increase. So I think it's worth looking at. I'm not against it. I just would like to have a little more information.
It's Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Middays with Mark. Coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. Welcome back. Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. And Cheryl in Teaneck, New Jersey. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. I am so thankful for this service. I just wanted to, I heard that there were some bills before Congress concerning Kashmir and India. Genocide Watch has said that this could be the largest genocide that has ever happened on the planet. Things are very bad with the RSS. I'm dismayed that the UN can even listen to this man with the amount of bloodshed. I heard testimony on Monday that between 70 and 90,000 people are missing, presumed dead. They're not giving death certificates. Situations like this come back to hurt us because we fail to take action. And then it breeds a ground for terrorism, for retaliation. I want to know, how much do you know about this situation? It's in the Times, Democracy Now!, Amnesty International. My governor, Phil Murphy, plans to go to India on Friday to talk about jobs. I'm not sure how he can do that with thousands of people dying. So if you can speak to anything, I would greatly appreciate it. And especially, is Congress aware? Are they taking any action?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Cheryl, thank you for raising this. And we actually, the night we flew in on Monday, had an exec committee meeting for the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And this was one of the subjects that people brought up organically. So people are watching it actually very closely. And I think there's going to be some committee activity on that. So rest assured, people are aware of what's going on and trying to figure out the best way to address it. So that's the good news, that it does have the attention of people in Congress.
Joel in Burlington, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning. Thank you both for your tremendous work. I greatly appreciate it. Quick reference to The Fall of Wisconsin. If people have not read it, it is a phenomenal book, not just for those in Wisconsin. And my question to Representative Pocan is, obviously we have an FEC that is crippled right now. Do you see any sort of improvement in that situation? And I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you.
Is that FEC, Federal Election Commission?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Joel.
I would imagine Mark Pocan is familiar with that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think what Joel's probably referring to, and I think we've talked about this a few weeks ago, is the fact that they're down to 3 members. They don't have a functioning majority. And we need to deal with that, because if you don't have a functioning majority, anyone can commit campaign violations and they won't be able to do anything about it. And I think, with Donald Trump in charge, a lot of people assume there could be some intent there. So I don't have an update, Joel, from I think when we talked about this a few weeks ago, but obviously very aware of what's going on. But we have to put some pressure on, I think, Republicans in the Senate to put pressure on the president on this, because you can't function with not having quorum.
Raymond in Las Vegas. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I had an interesting question about the soybean and corn farmers. It seems that the subsidies that the government's given is going to major corporations and the large corporate farmers. Is this kind of an underhanded attempt to get the family farmers to go bankrupting and lose their land to the corporate farmers for pennies on the dollar?
Yeah, Raymond, I would like to think that that's not what's going on. I do think it's just the president's ineptitude by doing trade policy and tariffs via Twitter. That's the real problem. But I just had a group from the Farmers Union in my office. I think they said 80% of the assistance has gone to the top 10% of these big farms. So the family farmers aren't seeing it. And someone earlier mentioned in my state, I think we might have the largest number of farm bankruptcies going on because we still had a lot of local family-owned farms, and people are really hurting in this industry. Soy and corn and dairy, specifically because of some of the Chinese tariffs, and we have a president who has no clue what he's doing in this area. So there's a lot of a tsunami of bad happening right now, and we are trying to find multiple ways to deal with this. Specifically, the president's inability to understand trade is having probably the biggest current impact.
William in Chicago, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, hi, Congressman. I understand you're the head of one of the largest caucuses in Congress. I would just wanted to know how you determine membership of the caucus or enforce discipline in it, and if your focus is primarily on a legislative agenda, or if you also did political, organizing contributions to individual progressive candidates in primaries or general elections.
Sure. I can try to answer both. Generally members choose to join the Progressive Caucus. We do give them a list of issues that are issues we've endorsed and ask that they're behind these issues, and often try to make sure they sign on to some major pieces of legislation. We just had someone recently who joined and agreed to those principles, but it is by self-selection. We don't have a recruitment process or something like that per se. And we do also have a political arm. We have a PAC. And we also have a nonprofit arm, a 501c3 and C4 arm, the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center, that some of us are on the board of. It is a separate entity, but it does have affiliation with the Progressive Caucus.
Steve in New Boston, Michigan. Steve, we have 60 seconds to the end of the hour. Can you ask your question real quick, please?
Yes, I'm just asking, what is going on with the congressional subpoenas that have been sent to various members of the Trump administration and are coming back just being ignored because the president says, well, you don't have to answer that subpoena. As a private citizen, if I get a subpoena, what do? Just ignore it, throw it away? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Let me take the answer after I hang up the call so I can hear.
Yeah, Steve, so a lot of it is right now, unfortunately, through the legal process, which is not a fast process, which is why Judiciary is taking up the impeachment investigation to give us more leverage to get witnesses to come.
Great. And in our final 15 seconds, what should we be looking at this week, Congressman?
I'll tell you, for the next few months, people have to be vigilant. We have a big agenda from the NAFTA 2.0 trade agreement, prescription drug pricing. There's a mass surveillance reform by the end of the year. The National Defense Authorization is going to come through a conference committee, gun violence prevention, Social Security, our continuing resolution, a lot of issues coming up. We need people to be very active in reaching out to members of Congress.
Wow, that's great. By the way, have you seen Adam Schiff's piece in the Washington Post about Chinese drugs?
No, I haven't.
It's really worth checking out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that next week.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you so much for being with us, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it as always.
Yep. Have a great afternoon. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
It's 9/11, and you probably noticed that the corporate media is talking about the victims of 9/11, which is an appropriate thing to do. Almost 3,000 people died here in the United States, tragically, and we mourn their loss. But they're not talking about the hundreds of thousands of Afghanis and Iraqis who died, hundreds of thousands in each country, millions who were displaced, had their lives turned upside down, destroyed in both those countries by unnecessary wars, by an unnecessary war in Afghanistan. Recall, the Taliban actually offered to arrest bin Laden and turn him over to a third country for trial. And George Bush said, no, I'd rather have a war. And then, of course, Dick Cheney lied us into the war in Afghanistan, into Iraq, and Halliburton, which he had been the CEO of and a major stockholder in, had been on the verge of bankruptcy when Cheney became vice president. And suddenly they're getting all these contracts without even asking for them. Literally no bid contracts. You don't have to submit a bid. You just get the money. And Halliburton is now, a very, very wealthy company, and Dick Cheney is now a very, very wealthy man. And somehow all of that seems to be completely missing from the corporate media. And there's huge lessons there that we need to learn. Here on Free Speech TV, you'll hear a little more than just the pablum that the media is putting out, that the corporate media puts out. And that's why you need to call right now and support this network and support this show, hopefully. But any show on this network, let's keep them all going. 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV needs your help. And the only way, literally, the only way that this network can keep going is if you call and make a contribution. With a $20 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann. Actually, I think we're changing the bumper sticker from the Thom Hartmann 2020 bumper sticker. We're going to replace that with Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. And because I'm really not, running for president or anything. Anyhow, that's with a $20 gift. With a $50 gift, we've got the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag, which is a nice canvas tote bag. With a $100 gift, the Free Speech TV Any Functional Adult, right? As opposed to Trump. We'll take any functional adult. And the size is small through XXL large. With a $150 gift, you get an autographed copy of my new book, Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. That's going to be shipped. It's going to take a few weeks to ship, but you'll get that. With a $250 gift, we're doing a virtual meet and greet. And if it's difficult for you to travel, or you'd rather not travel, or whatever, if you don't want to come to Portland, we can meet online and have a conversation. We'll get a bunch of people together and just do it as a video conference. You'll be able to see me. I won't be able to see you, but I'll be able to hear you. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland, hang out with us for the last hour of the show, and we'll go have lunch together. It'll be nice. We've done this a lot. We've got some folks coming by this Friday, day after tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to that. So anyhow, those are the premiums. But beyond the premiums, there's this whole larger point that while progressive politicians are really starting to make a dent. I mean, look at the Squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the most famous of the four. How people are like really excited about these folks. The two progressive candidates who are not taking any corporate dollars for president of the United States, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, between the two of them, they have 40% of the primary vote locked up right now. And I mean, you can add up all of the other candidates and they don't reach that. So that's pretty impressive. And where is the progressive media, right? The progressive politicians are taking off. They're really doing well. The progressive media, it's us. I mean, maybe you've got, one or two progressives who show up on, for example, MSNBC, but there's also Republicans all day long. And conservatives and toadies from the Reason Foundation that Charles Koch helped start and pays for. I mean, it's like, really? So if you want actual information, if you want real news, if you want to know what's really going on, this is the place. Free Speech TV. This is the place where you'll actually find out what's going on in the world. This is where we fill in all the missing pieces of the puzzle. We color in the gray areas and bring the picture into stark relief. We tell the stories that are not being told by corporate media. We give you a solid feel for what's actually happening in America and what's happening, basically what the sentiment is on the street. That is how average Americans think and feel, because they're calling into this program constantly and sharing their thoughts. And, the whole spectrum. I mean, I debate conservatives. We put callers on regardless of their political perspective. You really genuinely get to hear the whole spectrum and watch and listen to me trying to model how to have reasonable discussions and arguments, frankly, with some of these folks. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you. So every 5 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture comes out with new guidelines, and we just put up a video over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program that talks about how the Trump administration, in this insanely corrupt deal with the $100 billion industry of ultra-processed, high-sugar, high-salt, high-fat foods that is literally killing 700,000 Americans a year, has said, oh, we're going to change the guidelines so that these fast food, high-processed food companies can shovel their stuff into our school lunch programs, into our kids. We're going to change the guidelines so people aren't informed about the importance of dialing back somewhat on meat and on salt and sugar and all these other things. It's nuts. You can check the whole thing out over at thomhartmann.com. Look for the video for our, the supporters of our program at thomhartmann.com.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. There is a new race, a new congressional race in New Mexico for the 3rd District of New Mexico. Former CIA covert ops officer Valerie Plame, the author of Fair Game, My Life as a Spy, My Betrayal by the White House, is running for Congress. She's got a heck of an ad out. Valerie Plame for Congress.com is the website. And I believe we have her on the line. We've been trying to get her on the phone, and it hasn't been working. But Valerie Plame, can you hear us?
I sure can. Hi, Tom.
Great. Okay, super. Great to have you back. It's been years since you were on the program. And your husband's been on a number of times as well, Joe Wilson. Tell us, first of all, great driving. I encourage everybody to go check out your commercial. It's spectacular. Tell us about your candidacy and why you're running for Congress.
I'm running for Congress because I want to take this searing life experience of having been outed by the Bush administration being outed as a covert CIA operations officer, take that judgment, take those decision-making skills and put it to good use for my community in northern New Mexico. I have a record of speaking truth to power, and this is my home. I love it here. I can't imagine being anyplace else. This opportunity came up, and I thought, I can do that, and I can do that well.
There are a lot of people in the United States now who are stepping up and running for office, and I think it's just a marvelous thing. What are the issues in your mind that you would, if you were to go to Congress representing New Mexico, that you would want to champion?
Sure. So this district is enormous. It's apparently about the size of Florida. And because of that, it is extremely diverse. It's affluent, it's struggling, it's rural, it's urban. There's a Hispanic community, Anglo, our Pueblo native peoples. But here's the thing, as I go everywhere and listen carefully, like, what do you want from your next congressperson? And what do you want them to deliver? The same three things keep coming up for this community, which is education, economic opportunity, and concern about the environment. So I know those are three huge things, but that's what I hear over and over again.
And what specifically in those areas do you think needs to be done?
Well, unfortunately, New Mexico ranks 50th in the nation in child well-being. Education is absolutely crucial to that. We have failed generations of children. There is some progress being made. $450 million was just allocated in the last legislative session, so that helps. But we're pushing on universal pre-K, and then all the way through K through 12, and then trying to strengthen the culture of higher education, whether it's typical university 4-year or community colleges. New Mexico has an incredible potential and really good, hardworking, tolerant people, and we can do better than that for sure.
That's great. Today is the 18th anniversary of 9/11, which, for me, one of the take-homes of 9/11 is we should never again allow a president to exploit a national tragedy for political and in the case of Dick Cheney, probably financial purposes. I'm curious your thoughts. You don't need to respond to what I said, but I'm just curious your thoughts on this anniversary.
Well, we kind of know what happens. There was a blueprint, if you will, called the American Century. It was put together by a
the Project for New American Century.
Project for New American Century. Right. The blueprint was there saying, here's how we really want to project American robust military power to remake the map of the Middle East and so forth. And so that was done, I believe, in 1998. So what it also said is we need the sort of national emergency that we experienced in Pearl Harbor. And lo and behold, 9/11 comes along. And by that time, of course, neocons are in position of real power within the government and without. And all they had to do was take that blueprint off the shelf, dust it off, and get to work. And there was a rush to war, and it was, in my belief, one of the worst foreign policy follies this country has ever made, and we'll be paying for it for generations. To say we overreacted would be an understatement.
We're talking to Valerie Plame. She's running for the U.S. House of Representatives, the 3rd District of New Mexico. Valerie Plame for Congress.com. She's the former CIA officer, covert ops officer, who was outed by Scooter Libby on behalf of Dick Cheney as, would it be fair to say, as punishment for your husband calling out the Bush administration for their lies with regard to Iraq? I mean, you want to tell that story for people who are not familiar with it?
Yeah, what happened was in July 2003, Ambassador Joe Wilson wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times entitled "What I Did Not Find in Africa." And in it, he went after the central rationale that the Bush White House gave to take us into war with Iraq, which was you don't want to see the smoking gun in the shape of a mushroom cloud and that a nuclear threat is imminent. And he said, I think that the intelligence has been cherry-picked and manipulated. And that, by the way, the nuclear threat is way overblown, is certainly not imminent. The Bush administration did not take kindly to that. His was really the first voice to push back because there had been such a juggernaut and a jingoistic fervor in this country. And I believe as political payback, senior administration officials leaked my name, came up with this narrative that somehow Joe and I were scheming to undermine the presidency. And then, the rest kind of blew up from there. It became this huge media scandal that went on for years. And that chapter ultimately ended in March 2007 when Scooter Libby, Dick Cheney's chief of staff, was convicted on 4 out of 5 counts.
Remarkable. We're hearing that, one of the news reports this morning, in fact, I think it came from CBS, is that one of the main reasons Donald Trump was so upset with John Bolton and fired him is that Bolton was the guy responsible for leaking the story that on multiple occasions in national security meetings, Donald Trump had wanted to try using a nuke to stop a hurricane, and he was embarrassed by that. That, of course, one example of hundreds. I mean, today he in his remarks, he said that he and some of his employees went down to Ground Zero 9/11. There's no record of that. And previously, he has said that he was in New Jersey and he saw a bunch of Muslims celebrating. It's just all over the place. I'm wondering what kind of damage, as a former covert ops officer and employee of the Central Intelligence Agency, what kind of damage has been done to that agency and to our intelligence service more broadly, both by the ways that intelligence was misused by the Bush-Cheney administration and, by this helter-skelter, bouncing off the walls kind of response or interaction with the intelligence agencies saying, oh, I trust Vladimir Putin instead of my own intelligence from the Trump administration. Where are we at? How are the intelligence services doing?
Tom, considerable damage. Because we have a president who apparently likes to conduct foreign policy by tweet. All our senior officials, not just our intelligence community abroad, are constantly trying to clean up after the elephant in the circus, right? I mean, it's embarrassing. It seems he's working from ignorance for sure. His misunderstanding of our nuclear capabilities and how they should be used, or the guardrails that have been set up that he's busily dismantling, along with John Bolton. We're not sorry to see him go, by the way. It's very painful to see. I know my former colleagues within the CIA and throughout the intelligence community are appalled. Look, they serve as Americans. They don't serve as a Democrat. They don't serve as a Republican, except at, of course, at political levels. They are really, truly trying to keep America safe. And to have it led by such a feckless soul who has no ideology. I might even respect him a little bit if he had some, but he doesn't. It's just sort of off the cuff, responding to his own emotional needs of the moment.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Valerie Plame, she is running for Congress. The website is ValeriePlameForCongress.com. If you haven't seen her TV ad or her internet ad, be sure to check it out. It's really extraordinary. Former CIA covert officer running for the House of Representatives from New Mexico. Valerie, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, and I wish you the very best. We'll be back with more of our conversation, your and my conversation about 9/11. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with your calls on 9/11 and a little riff I've got here, too. We'll get right to that. And welcome back. Let's see here. Rick there we go. Rick in Boulder Creek, California. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
I am great. Hang on, Tom. I've got to get you off of speakerphone.
Generally speaking, better to just do it than to say it. Rick, what's on your mind?
Anyhow, I was going to talk about the monopoly of like the pharmaceuticals and virtually everything else. Mm-hmm. Eyeglasses, anything that comes from China, we're kind of screwed on.
Well, this was the op-ed piece that Adam Schiff wrote in today's Washington Post that I pointed out to Congressman Pocan. He points out, Schiff and his co-author point out in today's Washington Post that 80 to 90% of the stuff that is made into our pharmaceuticals, virtually 100% of blood pressure drugs and antibiotics, even though these drugs are largely manufactured in India, the actual drugs themselves, before in India they just press them into pills, but the raw material,
right, and a lot of the vaccines as well.
Yeah, and they're all coming out of China, and we don't know about quality control. We don't know about contaminants. We saw this huge scandal just a few months ago where several losartan and a couple of the other sartan type anti-blood pressure drugs were actually contaminated with rocket fuel.
Right, and how are you supposed to have quality control for that if you can't even see where it's being made or what's going in it?
Exactly. Yeah, this is a big issue, Rick, and it's something that needs to be dealt with at the level of legislation, and something that we need to point out. So I'm in agreement with you.
I have another really quick question.
Yeah.
All these people that have been going through Trump's administration, are they vested? Are they going to get retirement and stuff?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
That's an aside.
Yeah.
That's been kind of an aside in the back of my mind.
I'm guessing that there's probably pretty good retirement benefits for cabinet members, but
But have there been 40 of them now through Trump?
Yeah, I think 50. I think he's over 50 now. 50. In fact, I think Bolton was 51. It was
my gosh.
Something I saw this morning on one of the websites. I can't vouch for it, but yeah. So it is.
Yeah, so all these going to be, are we paying for all these people for life?
Well, that's the question, and I don't know the answer to that. Whether how federal retirement works at the level of being in the cabinet or being an advisor or being on the national security team, I just don't know. But Rick, thanks a lot for the call.
That's not nearly the danger of monopoly of pharmaceuticals, though. But anyway, thanks for talking.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, no, that monopoly of pharmaceuticals is huge, and there's. In fact, I've got just an absolutely extraordinary piece from today's Washington Post all about this that is really, really worth checking out. And it's by, as I said, it's by Adam Schiff, the congressman from California, who is just all over on top of this. By the way, another good headline: faced with soaring costs of private health insurance, poll shows 58% of small business owners support Medicare for all. 58%. As the owner of a small business myself, I'd say, yeah, a lot of us support Medicare for all. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. So every 5 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture comes out with new guidelines, and we just put up a video over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program that talks about how the Trump administration, in this insanely corrupt deal with the $100 billion industry of ultra-processed, high-sugar, high-salt, high-fat foods that is literally killing 700,000 Americans a year, has said, oh, we're going to change the guidelines so that these fast food, high-processed food companies can shovel their stuff into our school lunch programs, into our kids. We're going to change the guidelines so people aren't informed about the importance of, dialing back somewhat on meat and on salt and sugar and all these other things. It's nuts. You can check the whole thing out over at thomhartmann.com. Look for the video for our, the supporters of our program at thomhartmann.com. Thom Hartmann here with you. On this day 18 years ago, an obscure fundamentalist with about 5,000 followers attacked the United States. George W. Bush used this attack on the United States to lie us into a war with Iraq and to make Halliburton rich and to give himself political capital to get reelected in 2004. In fact, he signaled that this was coming, and as Valerie Plame pointed out in the last segment, this was something that was laid out by his brother Jeb, one of the signatories to the Project for a New American Century, back in 1998, when they sent a letter to then President Bill Clinton saying, you need to attack Iraq, but we realize that probably there won't be enough public support for an attack on Saddam Hussein in Iraq until there is a Pearl Harbor-style event. It literally says that in their letter to Bill Clinton, and in their overall document about how this needs to happen. And George Bush then said in 1999 to his biographer, Mickey Herskowitz, he said, well, in fact, actually, I've got the clip here. If you can bring up the 360. This is Cindy Sheehan testifying before the House of Representatives, I think. It's not. Here we go.
As a matter of fact, in interviews in 1999 with respected journalists and longtime Bush family friend Mickey Herskowitz, then Governor George Bush stated, one of the keys to being seen as a great leader is to be seen as commander-in-chief. My father had all this political capital built up when he drove the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and he wasted it. If I have a chance to invade, if I had that much capital, I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to get everything passed that I want to get passed, and I'm going to have a successful presidency, end quote.
There you go. That's what George Bush told his biographer in 1999 when Mickey Herskowitz had been hired to write George Bush's autobiography, A Charge to Keep. So that's where we're at. And in the process of, exploiting 9/11 for political purposes, George W. Bush elevated Osama bin Laden to near mythic status. I mean, he had to, in order for George Bush to be Superman, he had to turn bin Laden into Lex Luthor. And as I said, bin Laden was this obscure fundamentalist from a multimillionaire family who had basically disowned him. His own country had deported him. Saudi Arabia had deported him to I believe it was Somalia, where his mother was from. And he was nothing. I mean, he was this guy, he was this, rich kid with this fundamentalist rich kid who had this little training camp in Afghanistan. And Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban at the time, offered to have him arrested and turned over to a third country for trial for the crimes of 9/11. And George Bush said, no, we don't want to do that. I mean, this was reported by the Washington Post, of all places. So what happened by elevating the status of bin Laden, George W. Bush, by constantly yelling about him and turning this into this giant thing, he basically paved the way for the rise of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and this massive war in the Middle East that has cost us over 10,000 American lives, that has cost hundreds of thousands of lives in Iraq, hundreds of thousands of lives in Afghanistan, millions, at least 5 million people in Iraq turned into refugees. Several million people in Afghanistan turned into refugees. Bush chose to bomb the second poorest country in the world. Burkina Faso is the poorest country in the world. The second poorest country in the world was Afghanistan. They had a GDP in 2003 when he started bombing them. They had 2001. They had a gross domestic product of under $2 billion a year. We could have literally gone to Afghanistan and said, give us bin Laden, and we'll give you $2 billion. And everybody in Afghanistan is twice as rich as they are right now, which, they could have started schools, they could have started educating women, they could have modernized Afghanistan. All kinds of great stuff could have come out of this if we had just cooperated with them and helped build something. But no. George Bush was like, I've got to be Superman, he's got to be Lex Luthor. And then Cheney directed the CIA and our military to commit numerous war crimes and torture, and we built this prison in Guantanamo in Cuba that's illegal by international law. It's illegal by American law, for that matter. It's still there, and all violating international law and violating the fundamental precepts of a democratic republic. And this has devastated our image all over the world. I mean, the pictures of people being tortured at Abu Ghraib, it weakened our moral standing among democratic nations. My take on 9/11 is that never again can we allow a president and vice president as corrupt as George W. Bush and Dick Cheney to exploit a national tragedy or a terrorist incident. Keep in mind, this is how Adolf Hitler rose to power. When the German Parliament building was burned, he had just been appointed chancellor. He rushes down there, gets on the radio, and says, "This is a sign from God." And he used that to put himself into power and to make himself, basically the permanent head of Germany. And this is what, not quite on that scale, but this is what George W. Bush tried to do. We can't let it happen again. If we forget this part of the 9/11 story, we put ourselves at risk. 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So what are your thoughts on 9/11? And what do you think about my thoughts? We'll be right back. It's 9/11, and you probably noticed that the corporate media is talking about the victims of 9/11, which is an appropriate thing to do. Almost 3,000 people died here in the United States, tragically, and we mourn their loss. But they're not talking about the hundreds of thousands of Afghanis and Iraqis who died, hundreds of thousands in each country, millions who were displaced, had their lives turned upside down, destroyed in both those countries by unnecessary wars, by an unnecessary war in Afghanistan. Recall, the Taliban actually offered to arrest bin Laden and turn him over to a third country for trial. And George Bush said, no, I'd rather have a war. And then, of course, Dick Cheney lied us into the war in Afghanistan, into Iraq, and Halliburton, which he had been the CEO of and a major stockholder in, had been on the verge of bankruptcy when Cheney became vice president. And suddenly they're getting all these contracts without even asking for them. Literally no bid contracts. You don't have to submit a bid. You just get the money. And Halliburton is now, a very, very wealthy company, and Dick Cheney is now a very, very wealthy man. And somehow all of that seems to be completely missing from the corporate media. And there's huge lessons there that we need to learn. Here on Free Speech TV, you'll hear a little more than just the pablum that the media is putting out, that the corporate media puts out. And that's why you need to call right now and support this network and support this show, hopefully. But any show on this network, let's keep them all going. 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV needs your help. And the only way, literally, the only way that this network can keep going is if you call and make a contribution. With a $20 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann. Actually, I think we're changing the bumper sticker from the Thom Hartmann 2020 bumper sticker. We're going to replace that with Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. And because I'm really not, running for president or anything. Anyhow, that's with a $20 gift. With a $50 gift, we've got the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag, which is a nice canvas tote bag. With a $100 gift, the Free Speech TV Any Functional Adult, right? As opposed to Trump. We'll take any functional adult. And the size is small through XX large. With a $150 gift, you get an autographed copy of my new book, Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. That's going to be shipped. It's going to take a few weeks to ship, but you'll get that. With a $250 gift, we're doing a virtual meet and greet. And so, if it's difficult for you to travel, or you'd rather not travel, or, whatever, if you don't want to come to Portland, we can meet online and have a conversation. We'll get, a bunch of people together and just do it as a video conference. You'll be able to see me. I won't be able to see you, but I'll be able to hear you. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland, hang out with us for the last hour of the show, and we'll go have lunch together. It'll be nice. We've done this a lot. We've got some folks coming by this Friday, day after tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to that. So, anyhow, those are the premiums. But beyond the premiums, there's this whole, larger point that while progressive politicians are really starting to make a dent. I mean, look at the Squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the most famous of the four. How, people are really excited about these folks. The two progressive candidates who are not taking any corporate dollars for president of the United States, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, between the two of them, they have 40% of the primary vote locked up right now. And, you can add up all of the other candidates and they don't reach that. So that's pretty impressive. And where is the progressive media, right? The progressive politicians are taking off. They're really doing well. The progressive media, it's us. Maybe you've got, one or two progressives who show up on, for example, MSNBC, but there's also Republicans all day long. And conservatives and toadies from the Reason Foundation that Charles Koch helped start and page for. It's like, really? So if you want actual information, if you want real news, if you want to know what's really going on, this is the place, Free Speech TV. This is the place where you'll actually find out what's going on in the world. This is where we fill in all the missing pieces of the puzzle. We color in the gray areas and bring the picture into stark relief. We tell the stories that are not being told by corporate media. We give you a solid feel for what's actually happening in America and what's happening, basically what the sentiment is on the street. That is how average Americans think and feel, because they're calling into this program constantly and sharing their thoughts. And, the whole spectrum. I mean, I debate conservatives. We put callers on regardless of their political perspective. You really genuinely get to hear the whole spectrum and watch and listen to me trying to model how to have reasonable discussions and arguments, frankly, with some of these folks. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you. Amy McGrath, who is running against Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, says, on September 11, 2001, I was strapped in the backseat of a fully loaded two-seat FA-18 jet just off runway 24 left at the Marine Corps Air Station Miramar in San Diego, engines running, ready to launch at a moment's notice. This is who's running against Moscow, Mitch. Yeah, Marine fighter pilot. That's honest to God, it's just incredible. So anyhow, Donald Trump this morning says he was looking out his window at Trump Tower and saw the building hit. I'm not sure that you can see, or you could have seen, those buildings from Trump Tower. Mark Sumner is saying he would have required Superman-style X-ray vision. I don't know. He also said that he and an employee of his drove down there to see if they could help. I'm not believing that. And previously, as I said, Trump has said, he was in New Jersey and he was watching Muslims celebrate, right? He says, I went down to Ground Zero with men who work for me to try to help any little way that we could, right? In 2015, he says, I was in Jersey City, New Jersey, where thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. That's a verbatim quote from Donald Trump. Remarkable. Anyhow, your thoughts on all this. Jeanette in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Jeanette, what's up?
I'm thinking about 9/11, and any American alive today still knows where they were on that day. And I remember
any American,
Bush standing on that rubble.
Over 25 probably remembers it, but yeah.
Yes, and George Bush standing on that rubble, and we believed him, and we trusted him. And then you told us what they, Cheney and him, made out of this. Now, if we have another catastrophe, we've got a man in the White House we do not believe, we should not believe. And there's where we are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. So I take it Jeanette is basically echoing my concerns about this. Anyhow, Frank, and what's the city there? Frank, it says Paino. Is that supposed to be Plano?
Plano.
Oh, Plano. Okay.
Plano, Illinois. Yeah. Yes. A group of my friends and I were talking about the election coming up, 2020. Mm-hmm. Almost a consensus that's guaranteed that Trump's going to win. Basically, because the election where Samuel Titan beat Jim, what was his name, Blaine, in 1876, and Titan won by 36 electoral votes, and for some reason everything got thrown in the wind, and they picked Rutherford B. Hayes to win.
Right.
And we're just thinking that's like if somebody doesn't hold people like McConnell in contempt, or the president or somebody, it's almost guaranteed that Trump's going to win.
So boy, it's been a long time since I read that story about how Rutherford B. Hayes became president, and I can't, say that your characterization of it is entirely accurate because I don't, frankly, remember the details. I need to go back and look at it. But what you're saying, Frank, is that is not that you think that Trump will win the electoral vote, but that somehow the Republicans will ignore it or jerry-rig it or something?
Yes. Same way the red states that do vote in Democrats will be threatened in a way either with jobs or something to save their post. They're going to have to give up the electoral votes.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is that Trump is going to claim fraud and he's going to argue that the election was not legitimate and quack, quack, quack. And then he's going to go, this was in this, I think it was The Atlantic, this long piece about the sibling rivalry between Ivanka and Don Jr. and how they're starting to hate each other and all this other stuff, or get upset with each other. Who's going to follow? When Trump leaves. In that story, they talked about how at the time of the election back in November of 2016, the Trump family was planning on starting a television network to compete with Fox News. And they had to put that on hold because he got elected president. I'm guessing they'll pull those plans back out, dust them off, and Donald Trump is going to try and reinvent himself as Rupert Murdoch. And that might even be why he's occasionally trashing Fox News, is he's just kind of setting that up. But, who knows? Anyhow, John in Chicago. Hey, John, it says you disagree with me here. What's up?
Hey, Tom, talking about freedom of the press. Okay, so I don't care about left, right, Trump, and, whoever,
Then watch sports.
Liberals have, or sports.
Okay.
That's honestly.
So what's your point?
I'm talking about freedom of the press. My point is that why is there such a bias, Tom?
Bias. I don't know what you're talking about. Are you talking about Fox News?
I don't care about Fox News. I don't even watch Fox News.
All right. So
I'm talking about a bias against Donald Trump and what he has actually accomplished.
Well, I think if any president had told 12,000 lies in 2.5 years in office, that the press and the American people would be reasonably skeptical of him.
You think Barack Obama didn't tell lies?
As far as I know, the only time that Barack Obama ever said anything that has been documented not to be true is when he said, if you like your doctor, you can keep, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor with Obamacare. And it turned out that for about 1 or 2% of people who signed up for Obamacare, they had to change their doctor because they were actually changing health insurance companies.
That's centrist.
Tell me another lie that Obama told. I don't think you're going to be able to find one, but I can give you 12,000 lies that Donald Trump has made. And he's out there bragging right now, for example, John, that African-American unemployment is lower than it's ever been. Well, yeah, unemployment is lower than it's been in a long, long time. But the fact of the matter is that when Obama came into office, the African-American unemployment rate was around 9%. He took it down to around 5%.
Tom, you're lying. You lied. You're lying right now.
John, I encourage you to look it up. There was a great segment on this very topic on CNN last night. I'm literally not making this up. I mean, it's the fact of the matter is that Barack Obama lowered the unemployment rate for white people, for black people, for Hispanic, for everybody, for women, far more than Donald Trump has. The Obama recovery has slowed down in the last 2.5 years. I mean, the numbers are right there. You can check it out. It's real easy. It's not at all complicated. Anyhow, Tim in Aloha, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm kind of a history buff, and we've talked before about this, but what a lot of people don't understand, especially this being the anniversary, was the actionable intelligence that the Bush administration had weeks prior to that, to 9/11. They did absolutely nothing about it.
Yeah, well, actually, for a whole year, for almost a year prior. Yes,
scary stuff.
Well, in fact, on this program, Sandy Berger, who was the national security advisor to Bill Clinton and Al Gore, on this program, Sandy Berger told me, and thus everybody who was listening, that he had gone into the office of, who was the national security advisor for George W. Bush? I'm forgetting now. But in any case, he went in, he met with the national security advisor for George W. Bush and said, your number one priority is going to be Osama bin Laden. He's going to hit us in the United States. And he knew from his own personal experience that Bill Clinton said that to George W. Bush and that Al Gore said that to Dick Cheney. So all three levels were told, you need to look out for Osama bin Laden. And because it had been a priority of Bill Clinton, George W. Bush said, ignore that, basically.
Yeah. How many memorials is Trump going to have today for all the friends he lost in 9/11? Another lie that he told.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Remember when he said that?
Yes.
I mean, this is ridiculous. What it wasn't the Bush-Cheney administration. It was the Cheney-Bush administration.
Yeah.
Cheney robbed the bank and Bush drove the getaway car, basically.
Yeah, and the money from the bank robbery ended up in Halliburton, which is now in Cheney's pocket. Right. Tim, thanks for the call. Maverick in Edmonds, Washington. Hey, Maverick, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I remember 9/11. I was working at a music station in Seattle and just finished a midnight to 6 shift. Got home and saw the TV was on and what the events were unfolding. I don't know why, but I immediately went back to the station, and we switched format to an all-talk and took calls from people. And what I remember most about the aftermath of that horrible event was this tremendous sense of unity that swept the entire country. And I've always felt that kind of shows us what we could do if we all got together on something.
Right, and if a politician doesn't decide to cravenly exploit that for their own political and financial gain, which is what happened with Bush and Cheney. I'm with you. I'm with you, Maverick. Thank you very much for the call. And what a great story. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We're going to check in about 4 minutes with Bob Ney with Talk Media News. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
And it was Condoleezza Rice was the person that Sandy Berger met with, and he said, look out, bin Laden's coming to get you. And she apparently blew it off, too. We'll be back. And welcome back, Colleen in Long Island, New York. Hey, Colleen, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Oh, thank you. And I can't believe Condoleezza Rice blew it off. I thought she had a brain in her head.
Yeah. Well, maybe she was instructed to blow it off, or maybe she tried. To the best, it would be interesting to go back and see if she's ever been specifically interviewed about that. I don't know if she has or not.
Oh, she probably avoided all those questions. But yeah. I will tell you that I was in Manhattan on 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
I was across from Grand Central Station in an office. And that's about 30 blocks from Ground Zero.
Right.
And where we were, you wouldn't have known anything happened. But I will tell you that one man was taken off. He wanted to go back to Connecticut. And what the police and other authorities did was shut down every exit area out of Manhattan.
Right.
Because they didn't know what was going on.
Yep.
So, and I have an echo in my ear again this time, but I'm trying to ignore my own voice. Anyway, they shut down all exits, and so I couldn't leave Manhattan. And you couldn't get out on a train, a plane, a boat, a helicopter, a bridge, a tunnel. There was no exit. So if Donald Trump went to New Jersey, he transported himself with some Star Trek technology or something.
Yeah. Well, what he originally said a couple of years ago was that he was in New Jersey when 9/11 happened, and he saw all these Muslims dancing in the streets and celebrating. And what he said today was that he was in Trump Tower watching it happen, and he saw the second plane hit the building. And then he and a friend of his got in a car and drove down to the site to see if they could help.
Not possible.
Yeah.
Not possible.
Yeah, I agree.
No, they closed off. They closed off Manhattan. I couldn't get home until about 9:00 at night when they started letting the subways run again.
Yeah.
And there was no way anybody was getting. There was no air traffic. There was no train traffic. Subways.
Well, couldn't he have gotten in his limo at Trump Tower and driven downtown?
They wouldn't have let him cross the bridge.
No. 9/11. He was on Manhattan Island.
No, they wouldn't have let him out of Manhattan Island.
No, but 9/11 happened on Manhattan Island also. So if he left Trump Tower,
yeah, but they wouldn't have let him. Nobody was being allowed to cross the bridge anywhere in the area. You couldn't come in from New Jersey. You couldn't go out to New Jersey.
No. What I'm saying, Colleen, is a couple of years ago he said he was in New Jersey. Today he said he was in Manhattan at Trump Tower, and when this, which is on it's on Fifth Avenue, as I recall. And when this happened, he and one of his employees got in their car and drove down to the World Trade Centers, which would also be on Manhattan Island. But my recollection is that the police had cordoned off, 30, 40 square blocks of that area, and nobody could have gotten in. Although I may be wrong. I mean, I wasn't, in Manhattan.
No, you're not wrong. And I was standing on Fifth Avenue when these people were walking north, and they were covered with dust and debris. And people were handing out bottles of water, and we were trying to help people who were collapsing. It was just chaos.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that if Trump actually tried to do anything like that, he would have had somebody take pictures of it. And I'm not seeing any pictures anywhere. So
it never. Only in his delusion it happened.
Yeah. Once again, he's lying through his teeth. Colleen, thank you for the call, and thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. So every 5 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture comes out with new guidelines, and we just put up a video over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program that talks about how the Trump administration, in this insanely corrupt deal with the $100 billion industry of ultra-processed, high-sugar, high-salt, high-fat foods that is literally killing 700,000 Americans a year, has said, oh, we're going to change the guidelines so that these fast food, high-processed food companies can shovel their stuff into our school lunch programs, into our kids. We're going to change the guidelines so people aren't informed about the importance of, dialing back somewhat on meat and on salt and sugar and all these other things. It's nuts. You can check the whole thing out over at ThomHartmann.com. Look for the video for our, the supporters of our program at ThomHartmann.com. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, a new book by Ellen Ratner. On the line with us is Bob Ney, the author of Sideswiped, former congressman from Ohio. Congressman, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Tom.
We've been talking about 9/11, Bob. For me, the biggest lesson of 9/11 was beware of presidents and vice presidents who try to exploit national tragedies for political purposes and to turn their Halliburton company into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise when it's about to go bankrupt. I'm wondering what the lesson of 9/11 is for you.
Well, for us, I think it was the fact that we needed to have a balance, and I want to give a lot of credit here. Steny Hoyer, who is the number 2 Democratic official in America, right behind Speaker Pelosi, Steny Hoyer worked with us, with the Committee of House Administration, in a completely bipartisan way, and in not one sense of the step along the path, Tom, did he ever politicize anything, and he worked to secure the security of the Capitol, which is important nationwide, and it's important for our family of 10,000-some people alone on the House side that work there. So, the lesson that I think we learned was that we had to have a balance because Steny Hoyer, like myself and others, there was movements at that time to shut down the Capitol, stop the tours, put barrier around it, put a fence around it, for 6 blocks, all these types of things. It was an attempt to actually close the place off from people, legitimizing it
by saying we'd have to do it in the interest of national security. So for me, I learned a balance lesson out of that, and Steny Hoyer provided fantastic support on that. There is a balance there. And the reason I mention that is because it was an emergency where people wanted to restrict reporters from the Capitol. They wanted to restrict people from the Capitol, like the Patriot Act, which was used as an emergency provision, to do other things that were nefarious. We all know that now. And also the biggest one of all, it was used to invade a country that there weren't 19 Iraqis on the airplanes. There were 19 Saudis on the airplanes. We attacked Iraq.
Right. Yeah. Big mistake.
For money.
Yeah.
For the military complex.
Well, and also because, as Dick Cheney pointed out, Iraq is the second largest source of oil in the world. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
No question.
So, Bob, what's in the news today?
Well, and again, we remember all the people, unfortunately, that lost their lives there, and it's such a sad note. But I think there's a positive note for the world today, Tom. As you know, on your show, around June 10th or 11th, I predicted that John Bolton would not last the end of the summer, and I put it on Facebook, and I told all of our stations that we call into.
Wow, and you were like one day off.
Oh, right. Well, I had a 10-day leave, summertime. But it's a happy day, I think, for the world, honestly. And, I'm seeing some of the media who do not like Trump, and I understand that, but they're trying to make it, John Bolton was the hero that stood up. No, John Bolton was part of the Cheney system. As long as John Bolton was in the White House, Dick Cheney was in the White House, Halliburton was in the White House. Bolton was the guy, as you know his history, Tom. I don't have to tell you, the history of Bolton, how he was involved with the fake information on Iraq, how he almost got us into a war with Iran. And this is the one thing, a clock... what do they say? A clock makes the right call twice a day.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day.
All right. Right. Okay. Well, President Trump was right on this one because Bolton was a danger. And I don't care how he got fired or how he got dismissed. The fact is he did get dismissed. And I think this is a great positive step.
Yeah.
I really do.
And they're also, it's kind of weird. They're saying that Bolton objected to the Taliban coming. I get that, but I think the less well publicized story, and it's from one of the major TV networks, one of the three big networks, I don't recall if it's CBS or ABC, was that Bolton was the guy who leaked the story that in a national security meeting, Trump wanted to bomb a hurricane with a nuke. And that Trump was very upset with him about that.
We won't know, Tom, for years all the things Bolton did. We have to remember something. John Bolton was the national security advisor, as before him, Condoleezza Rice, et cetera, people in key positions, right? Sandy Berger. And what ends up happening, these people in these positions have access to the NSA, the National Security Agency, the CIA. They have access to top-level rogue people if they want in those organizations. Also, I think history will show that John Bolton was the one who fed information to England in order to get them to take the Iranian tanker, telling them it was headed for somewhere else. I think years from now we will find out what John Bolton was doing. We just don't know the full adventures that he tried to carry out in order to put us into war. There was no question. He wanted Trump to be the wartime president.
Amazing. So what else is up, Bob?
Well, the decision on asylum is continuing on because there was the Ninth Circuit.
This is for Bahamians? You mean?
Yeah, Ninth Circuit, where they have to do third-party asylum requests.
Okay.
Third-country asylum requests.
Okay.
And of course, this is tying into a whole barrage of things that we're not even keeping up with hardly in the media because there's so many other issues out there.
Oh, you're talking about Trump's policy that people from Guatemala, for example, have to apply in Mexico rather than here.
Correct.
Mexico being a third country.
And so now what this does, this decision yesterday, will mean that this will take effect. People coming into Texas and New Mexico. It's not good for people trying to seek asylum.
Remarkable. Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Great talking with you today. We'll be back. We're going to continue our conversations about 9/11. I've got a whole pile of news to share with you. There's just some incredible stuff going on in the world and some very concerning things about our relationship with China. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
It's 9/11, and you probably noticed that the corporate media is talking about the victims of 9/11, which is an appropriate thing to do. Almost 3,000 people died here in the United States, tragically, and we mourn their loss. But they're not talking about the hundreds of thousands of Afghanis and Iraqis who died, hundreds of thousands in each country, millions who were displaced, had their lives turned upside down, destroyed in both those countries by unnecessary wars, by an unnecessary war in Afghanistan. Recall, the Taliban actually offered to arrest bin Laden and turn him over to a third country for trial. And George Bush said, no, I'd rather have a war. And then, of course, Dick Cheney lied us into the war in Afghanistan, into Iraq, And Halliburton, which he had been the CEO of and a major stockholder in, had been on the verge of bankruptcy when Cheney became vice president. And suddenly they're getting all these contracts without even asking for them. Literally no bid contracts. You don't have to submit a bid. You just get the money. And Halliburton is now, a very, very wealthy company, and Dick Cheney is now a very, very wealthy man. And somehow all of that seems to be completely missing from the corporate media. And there's huge lessons there that we need to learn. Here on Free Speech TV, you'll hear a little more than just the pablum that the media is putting out, that the corporate media puts out. And that's why you need to call right now and support this network and support this show, hopefully. But any show on this network, let's keep them all going. 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV needs your help. And the only way, literally, the only way that this network can keep going is if you call and make a contribution. With a $20 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann. Actually, I think we're changing the bumper sticker from the Thom Hartmann 2020 bumper sticker. We're going to replace that with Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. And because I'm really not, running for president or anything. Anyhow, that's with a $20 gift. With a $50 gift, we've got the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag, which is a nice canvas tote bag. With a $100 gift, the Free Speech TV Any Functional Adult, right? As opposed to Trump. We'll take any functional adult. And the size is small through XX large. With a $150 gift, you get an autographed copy of my new book, Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. That's going to be shipped. It's going to take a few weeks to ship, but you'll get that. With a $250 gift, we're doing a virtual meet and greet. And if it's difficult for you to travel, or you'd rather not travel, or whatever, if you don't want to come to Portland, we can meet online and have a conversation. We'll get a bunch of people together and just do it as a video conference. You'll be able to see me. I won't be able to see you, but I'll be able to hear you. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland, hang out with us for the last hour of the show, and we'll go have lunch together. It'll be nice. We've done this a lot. We've got some folks coming by this Friday, day after tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to that. So anyhow, those are the premiums. But beyond the premiums, there's this whole larger point that while progressive politicians are really starting to make a dent. I mean, look at the Squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the most famous of the four. How people are like really excited about these folks. The two progressive candidates who are not taking any corporate dollars for president of the United States, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, between the two of them, they have 40% of the primary vote locked up right now. And, I mean, you can add up all of the other candidates, and they don't reach that. So that's pretty impressive. And where is the progressive media, right? The progressive politicians are taking off. They're really doing well. The progressive media, it's us. I mean, maybe you've got, one or two progressives who show up on, for example, MSNBC, but there's also Republicans all day long. And conservatives and toadies from the Reason Foundation that Charles Koch helped start and pays for. I mean, it's like, really? So if you want actual information, if you want real news, if you want to know what's really going on, this is the place. Free Speech TV. This is the place where you'll actually find out what's going on in the world. This is where we fill in all the missing pieces of the puzzle. We color in the gray areas and bring the picture into stark relief. We tell the stories that are not being told by corporate media. We give you a solid feel for what's actually happening in America and what's happening, basically what the sentiment is on the street. That is how average Americans think and feel, because they're calling into this program constantly and sharing their thoughts. And, you know, the whole spectrum. I mean, you know, I debate conservatives. We put callers on regardless of their political perspective. You really genuinely get to hear the whole spectrum and watch and listen to me trying to model how to have reasonable discussions and arguments, frankly, with some of these folks. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you. So every 5 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture comes out with new guidelines, and we just put up a video over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program that talks about how the Trump administration, in this insanely corrupt deal with the $100 billion industry of ultra-processed, high-sugar, high-salt, high-fat foods that is literally killing 700,000 Americans a year, has said, oh, we're going to change the guidelines so that these fast food, high-processed food companies can shovel their stuff into our school lunch programs, into our kids. We're going to change the guidelines so people aren't informed about the importance of, you know, dialing back somewhat on meat and on salt and sugar and all these other things. It's nuts. You can check the whole thing out over at thomhartmann.com. Look for the video for our, you know, the supporters of our program at thomhartmann.com. My brother Daniel Ford.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's 9/11, the 18th anniversary of 9/11. So I'm guessing you remember it if you're more than 25 years old, more or less. And if you're younger than that, you may not. But it was a big deal. And what was, in my opinion, a particularly big deal about it was the way that George W. Bush exploited it. You'll recall back in well, if you're young, you may not recall, but maybe you've read the histories. Back in 1998, there was this group called the Project for a New American Century. Jeb Bush was part of this. And the Project for among others. And the Project for a New American Century published this document saying that the big thing that we needed to do was invade Iraq. Now, Iraq, as Dick Cheney famously said, had the second largest oil reserves in the world. And most of them were untapped, so it was virgin oil. It was oil, I mean, you know, Saudi Arabia's oil is starting to get expensive. They're having to inject water into their wells. They're sucking, you know, on the straw really, really hard because they're about half empty. They're about half depleted. You know, we've been pumping oil out of Saudi Arabia since the 1920s. And but Iraq's oil, much of Iraq's oil they'd never even drilled into these giant pools of oil. So, you know, fresh oil, virgin oil, new oil fields, when you drill into them, you get geysers. I mean, the oil comes out under pressure. And so it's really, really cheap to pump. I mean, you know, $2, $3, $5 a barrel at the most. And then you can sell it for $50, $100, you know, whatever the spot price oil is in the world. Whereas in Saudi Arabia, it's costing them $30, $40, $50 a barrel to suck this, you know, depending on the oil fields and, you know, a whole bunch of other variables, but it's costing them a whole lot more money. So Saudi oil is getting more expensive. A lot of American oil is getting more expensive. Fracking is expensive. But Iraqi oil, really, really cheap. Very, very profitable. So the Project for a New American Century said, let's invade Iraq and take their oil. But the Project for a New American Century said, we will need as Valerie Plame said on this program just 1 hour ago right now, we will need a Pearl Harbor-style event, an attack on America, in order to galvanize American public opinion in a way that they would support going to war with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And, of course, that happened on 9/11. This is not to say that the Project for a New American Century caused that to happen. I'm quite confident that it was Osama bin Laden and his merry band who caused that to happen. But nonetheless, that's, that happened. And here we are. And so the way that this was exploited is just breathtaking. George W. Bush, and if you want to bring up the 360 here, Sean, I'm going to play this again. Cindy Sheehan testified about this before the U.S. House of Representatives. This was John Conyers held a hearing on this on 9/11, and Cindy tells the story. Cindy Sheehan, the mother of the Gold Star mother of a son who died in Iraq, tells this story.
As a matter of fact, in interviews in 1999 with respected journalists and longtime Bush family friend Mickey Herskowitz, then Governor George Bush stated, "One of the keys to being seen as a great leader is to be seen as commander-in-chief. My father had all this political capital built up when he drove the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and he wasted it. If I have a chance to invade, if I had that much capital, I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to get everything passed that I want to get passed, and I'm going to have a successful presidency," end quote.
Right, and what he wanted to get passed was privatizing Social Security. And right after after he won the election in 2004, right after he got re-inaugurated in 2005, he went on a road show, traveling all around the country, pitching, privatizing Social Security. He famously gave a speech in which he said, "I've got political capital now from this, from winning re-election, and I'm going to use it to privatize Social Security." That was his thing. And all these people in Iraq, hundreds of thousands of people, died because Bush lied us into this war. And Dick Cheney lied us into this war, and they cherry-picked intelligence, and they force-fed intelligence. Dick Cheney was running back and forth between the White House and CIA headquarters constantly. Richard Clark, we've all heard these stories. That these two men not only committed war crimes in both the war with Afghanistan and the war with Iraq. The war with Afghanistan was equally unnecessary. Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban, offered to arrest Osama bin Laden and turn him over to a third country for trial. And George Bush said, no, we'd rather have a war. He always wanted a war. And Cheney wanted a war. Halliburton was a failing company. It was on the verge of bankruptcy when Dick Cheney became vice president. Because a couple of years earlier, I think it was a year and a half earlier, Dick Cheney had Halliburton. He was CEO of Halliburton, and he had the company acquire Dresser Industries, thinking that Dresser Industries used to sell asbestos. And Cheney was assuming that Congress was going to pass this giant piece of legislation to take on the responsibility of reimbursing people like my father, of making them whole, at least financially, their families, for those people who got mesothelioma from asbestos. And Congress hadn't done that, and Halliburton was on the verge of bankruptcy when Cheney became vice president. And so, boom, you got a war in Afghanistan first, and then a war in Iraq, and what happens? Halliburton starts literally getting phone calls from Washington, D.C. saying, we'd like to give you billions of dollars. They weren't even asking for it. That's what a no-bid contract is. You don't submit a bid. You don't ask for the work. You just sit there and answer the phone. The government calls up and says, hey, we want to give you money. And Cheney's a rich man now. His daughter's in Congress. And Halliburton is huge as a result of these two wars. So we got lied to by our president. We were lied to by our vice president. Colin Powell, to this day, is living with the shame of having participated as the Secretary of State and having lied to the American public and to the world at the United Nations. Lawrence Wilkerson has come, who is Colin Powell's assistant, has come on this program several times and talked explicitly about this. Yes, they were lying to us. Bush and Cheney were lying to Colin Powell and Lawrence Wilkerson. I mean, that's how bad it was. And I think if there's any lesson to be learned from 9/11, it's that we can never again tolerate presidents who are liars. Presidents who will use terrible events like 9/11 for craven political exploitation. And frankly, we saw an example of that this morning when Donald Trump said that when 9/11 happened, he watched the second building get hit, and he drove down to where the buildings were to try and help out. Previously, he has said he was in New Jersey, and he saw a bunch of Muslims dancing in the street. Of course, there was never any Muslims dancing in the street about 9/11, but Trump said he was in New Jersey. I mean, who knows where he was? The guy can't, recite a nursery rhyme without lying. It's like he can't describe the weather without lying. But it's not a laughing matter. I mean, this is serious stuff. 9/11 was used to make Halliburton rich, to make Blackwater rich, to make a bunch of these guys rich, and to seize political power. Meanwhile, there's another get-rich-quick scheme that Trump is promoting. Fox News has been doing this thing lately on TV where they go into cities that have Democratic leadership, like San Francisco or Los Angeles, and do little mini documentaries, I guess it is, or commentaries anyway, on the homeless problem in these cities. And they're portraying these democratically run cities as basically filthy and crime-infested and full of homeless people. They have no interest, by the way, in talking about the real deep pockets of poverty in the United States, which are in like Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia and the red states. So anyhow, Fox has been doing this, and Trump is like, oh, well, that's interesting. And so now he's suggesting, apparently, that there be, well, what he called for was, quote, a major crackdown, end quote, on homelessness in California, and said we should move these people out of the existing homeless encampments and into government-backed facilities. Now, what would that be? Well, can you say GEO Group? Private prisons? The same people who are charging $750 a day to keep children in cages? Presumably, if this is what Trump is talking about, we'll start getting, your my tax dollars to incarcerate homeless people. This is what Diane Yentl, the president and CEO of the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, said. They propose, quote, they propose drastically shrinking or eliminating federal programs that keep the lowest income people affordably housed. They propose, this is the Trump administration, Trump-Pence administration, tripling rents for the lowest income subsidized residents and raising rents for all the others, evicting 100,000 people, including 55,000 American children, from subsidized housing, and allowing homeless shelters to discriminate and refuse shelter to transgender and other LGBT people. And then Bob Erlandsbush, the executive director of the Sacramento Regional Coalition to End Homelessness, told USA Today that Trump's plans would effectively create, quote, internment camps for people experiencing homelessness. And so some California Democrats said today that Trump's crackdown is basically, they're accusing the president of having a feigned concern for homelessness for political purposes. It's amazing, led by Fox News. Surprise, surprise. So anyhow, your thoughts on 9/11. We've got a few other news stories to get to, by the way. The tweet of the day, this is the quote of the day, actually. Well, it's a tweet. It's from Stuart Stevens, a GOP strategist on Twitter, talking about Trump. His campaign manager is a felon. His deputy campaign manager is a felon. His personal lawyer is a felon. His foreign policy advisor is a felon. His national security advisor is a felon. The Trump campaign was run by criminals. Plus the guy on the top of the ticket.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
More of the news of the day right after this. It's 17 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Let's see here. Trying to see who's been on hold the longest. Sheila. Whoops, wrong. Well, I've got her on what do you call it? Hybrid number 2. So Sheila in Talent, Oregon. Hey, Sheila, what's on your mind today?
Hi, am I on?
You are on. Yeah, I just Joyce had to pile you up on a different slider there.
several sources I'd read over a period of time that would pop up on my phone regarding Trump and his statements. One of them, he said that he saw people jumping from the tower. The Trump Tower is 4 miles from the Twin Towers.
Right.
He couldn't have seen it unless he's got a high-power scope, and he might because he's the kind of person that would stare into young women's windows to watch them undress. He was also, that speaks for itself, that he was in 2 places at once, New York and New Jersey. That's been disputed. That he said he sent workers to the site. Right. Now, what I read from a man who was organizing the union workers who were down there because New York security could clear them easier. There were no Trump workers there, and they certainly would have recognized Trump. They said he was not there. We all know he doesn't like dirt, and he's a safety freak for himself.
Right.
So he'd never go anywhere. He'd never endanger himself.
I'm guessing if he was at Trump Tower, he went down to the basement to hide out.
Yeah, in his own. Yeah, he did allow, the only thing he allowed, he never helped in any financial way afterwards. He did allow somebody to store something in one of his buildings. He's really, if you think about it, he's an over-the-top Walter Mitty. He injects his self-aggrandizing fantasies into his narrative. The rest of us, we keep our little fantasies to ourselves. He doesn't. He takes them out there. He is so mentally deranged that he doesn't even remember from one day to the next what he said. And this man is in charge of the nation with the greatest military power. And every day I just wake up thinking, okay, another day I've got to wonder if we're going to get through it without hearing that he has started some kind of global conflict somewhere in the Middle East. And I have a nephew right now that is going to be sent overseas, and for the first time, I think he may be safer overseas than if they stationed him in Texas. This is the country I live in, and I just don't know anymore. And I listened to that man who called you a liar earlier and will not listen to any reason. And I remembered Thomas Paine's quote, "To argue with a person who has renounced the use of reason is like administering medicine to the dead." And I feel that way with people that you cannot reason with. That man would listen to nothing. I bet he believes every word that Trump has said, even though he's been caught out in every lie that he said. And I don't know. And I did, this is off the subject, but Valerie Plame.
Wasn't that a great interview?
Plame. Oh, my. There's only one word I can describe for it, hot.
Yeah.
She was great. And I just sent her a contribution. And I sent another one off to Jamie Harrison, who's going up against Lindsay, who stands a good chance of taking that little weasel out.
Really? You think so?
That's what they're predicting right now. He's gaining strength. And I just hope and pray that they get enough that they don't have. If there's no interference, they may.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for your show.
Sure.
And let's just get through today.
You got it. Thanks for the call, Sheila. Great to hear from you. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. It's 21 minutes past the hour. Stick around. So every 5 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture comes out with new guidelines, and we just put up a video over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program that talks about how the Trump administration, in this insanely corrupt deal with the $100 billion industry of ultra-processed, high-sugar, high-salt, high-fat foods that is literally killing 700,000 Americans a year, has said, oh, we're going to change the guidelines so that these fast food, high-processed food companies can shovel their stuff into our school lunch programs, into our kids. We're going to change the guidelines so people aren't informed about the importance of, dialing back somewhat on meat and on salt and sugar and all these other things. It's nuts. You can check the whole thing out over at thomhartmann.com. Look for the video for our, the supporters of our program at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, there we go. And just talking about, what's going on in the world here. Valerie in San Diego. Hey, Valerie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I'm one of the homeless in San Diego, and this new idea that Trump is getting involved is extremely scary. We already have they just put a new ordinance into San Diego to arrest people living in their vehicles.
Wow.
We have now become criminals, for being homeless. And this is scary.
Valerie.
And I think and the reason I called is to let people be aware that this is happening. And in the rest of California, they're coming up with draconian laws like this, too. I stood up in front of city council and begged them not to do this. I said, this is draconian and it's evil. And this comes from our mayor. He hates people who live in RVs.
Valerie, if and feel free to say that you don't want to talk about it, but I'm curious, how did you end up homeless?
I'm on disability. I can't afford rent and to live too.
Mm-hmm. So are you living out of your vehicle, or how are you living?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of people who are disabled living in their vehicles in California. And then to add to the problem, with all the fires that we've been having, there are a lot more people living in RVs, which is really upsetting a lot of people who live in houses that all these RVs are around. So it's blooming, and this is part of the climate crisis. And then San Diego wants us to go inland, and we can't do that because it's too hot for us because of the climate change.
Right. And it's expensive to run air conditioning. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I get it.
Exactly.
Well, Valerie,
and with the little money that we have, it just makes it that much harder for us. And it's scary as hell that they can come out and just arrest us. And then what's going to happen? I've got 2 pets. What's going to happen to my pets? What's going to happen to my RV if they tow it away and let me out? Then I'm on the streets. Right. Wow. Valerie, thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for what you do. Thank you very much. This is tough stuff. I mean, and Trump wants to turn it into a profit opportunity for his private contractors. It's mind-boggling. Ronald in Chicago. Hey, Ronald, what's on your mind?
Good afternoon. How are you? Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Just listening to that lady there about tears in my eyes. And I'm not homeless, and I'm okay. But just the idea of that happening. What I originally wanted to talk about, I'm not going to, because I want to say something about that wall and Trump is building to keep people out, and people on the inside of that wall, the people of this country, are suffering. And he's going to spend billions of dollars to try to keep some people out, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, he's trying to do this now with Bahamian refugees. He's trying to keep them out.
Now he wants to deny them. It always seems to be people of color.
Yep.
That he don't want in.
Yeah, there's definitely a thread here. In fact, he's said he wants more refugees, more immigrants from Norway. Guess who's in Norway?
Yeah.
People with white skin.
Absolutely, and and it's just a shame. And when I think back to 9/11, how he started lying from the very beginning before he became president about being there.
Yeah.
That alone was just ridiculous, and I don't know. It's scary. He's scary. He's a scary person.
Yeah, he is. Anybody who lies as frequently and as aggressively as he does is genuinely scary. Ronald, thank you for the call. It's nice to hear from you. We'll be back. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, continuing our conversation about 9/11 and the news of the day.
Listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the place where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? And we dare to say, no, not a chance. We'll be right back.
This.
It's 9/11, and you probably noticed that the corporate media is talking about the victims of 9/11, which is an appropriate thing to do. Almost 3,000 people died here in the United States, tragically, and we mourn their loss. But they're not talking about the hundreds of thousands of Afghanis and Iraqis who died, hundreds of thousands in each country, millions who were displaced, had their lives turned upside down, destroyed, in both those countries by unnecessary wars, by an unnecessary war in Afghanistan. Recall, the Taliban actually offered to arrest bin Laden and turn him over to a third country for trial. And George Bush said, no, I'd rather have a war. And then, of course, Dick Cheney lied us into the war in Afghanistan, into Iraq, excuse me. And Halliburton, which he had been the CEO of and a major stockholder in, had been on the verge of bankruptcy when Cheney became vice president. And suddenly they're getting all these contracts without even asking for them. Literally no bid contracts. You don't have to submit a bid. You just get the money. And Halliburton is now, a very, very wealthy company, and Dick Cheney is now a very, very wealthy man. And somehow all of that seems to be completely missing from the corporate media. And there's huge lessons there that we need to learn. Here on Free Speech TV, you'll hear a little more than just the pablum that the media is putting out, that the corporate media puts out. And that's why you need to call right now and support this network and support this show, hopefully. But any show on this network, let's keep them all going. 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV needs your help. And the only way, literally, the only way that this network can keep going is if you call and make a contribution. With a $20 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann. Actually, I think we're changing the bumper sticker from the Thom Hartmann 2020 bumper sticker. We're going to replace that with Proud Student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. And because I'm really not, running for president or anything. Anyhow, that's with a $20 gift. With a $50 gift, we've got the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag, which is a nice canvas tote bag. With a $100 gift, the Free Speech TV Any Functional Adult, right? As opposed to Trump. We'll take any functional adult. And the size is small through XX large. With a $150 gift, you get an autographed copy of my new book, Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. That's going to be shipped. It's going to take a few weeks to ship, but you'll get that. With a $250 gift, we're doing a virtual meet and greet. And if it's difficult for you to travel, or you'd rather not travel, or whatever, if you don't want to come to Portland, we can meet online and have a conversation. We'll get a bunch of people together and just do it as a video conference. You'll be able to see me. I won't be able to see you, but I'll be able to hear you. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland, hang out with us for the last hour of the show, and we'll go have lunch together. It'll be nice. We've done this a lot. We've got some folks coming by this Friday, day after tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to that. So anyhow, those are the premiums. But beyond the premiums, there's this whole larger point that while progressive politicians are really starting to make a dent. I mean, look at the Squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the most famous of the four. How people are really excited about these folks. The two progressive candidates who are not taking any corporate dollars for president of the United States, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, between the two of them, they have 40% of the primary vote locked up right now. And, I mean, you can add up all of the other candidates and they don't reach that. So that's pretty impressive. And where is the progressive media, right? The progressive politicians are taking off. They're really doing well. The progressive media, it's us. I mean, maybe you've got, one or two progressives who show up on, for example, MSNBC, but there's also Republicans all day long. And conservatives and toadies from the Reason Foundation that Charles Koch helped start and page for. I mean, it's like, really? So if you want actual information, if you want real news, if you want to know what's really going on, this is the place, Free Speech TV. This is the place where you'll actually find out what's going on in the world. This is where we fill in all the missing pieces of the puzzle. We color in the gray areas and bring the picture into stark relief. We tell the stories that are not being told by corporate media. We give you a solid feel for what's actually happening in America and what's happening, basically what the sentiment is on the street. That is how average Americans think and feel, because they're calling into this program constantly and sharing their thoughts. And, the whole spectrum. I mean, I debate conservatives. We put callers on regardless of their political perspective. You really genuinely get to hear the whole spectrum and watch and listen to me trying to model how to have reasonable discussions and arguments, frankly, with some of these folks. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Thank you. Moscow Mitch stiffs coal miners' pensions. This is amazing. I just have to pop this up, and then I'll pick up your phone calls here. Joe Manchin, there's this $90 million allocation from the Department of the Interior, quote, to help 3 Appalachian states cope with the impact of a declining coal industry. And Joe Manchin wanted to route that money, it's to deal with the loss of coal as an income. And he wants it to go to miners who are sick to help them. And Mitch McConnell blocked that and instead is routing the money to this aluminum factory that's owned by this Russian oligarch that they're building in Kentucky, according to Joan McCarter over on dailycoz.com. McConnell blocked a measure sponsored by Senator Joe Manchin, West Virginia Democrat, to use fees the Treasury Department has collected from coal companies to secure coal miners' pensions and health care plans. McConnell blocked the amendment. Joe Manchin said, quote, there are amendments that benefit Americans and West Virginians that are being blocked by one person, Mitch McConnell. He is the sole person that is blocking a vote on my amendment to secure coal miners' health care and pensions, even though it has bipartisan support and would better the lives of every West Virginian, Kentuckian, and American. This is mind-boggling. When Joe Manchin is calling out Mitch McConnell, you know that something serious is going on. So to your calls, Mike. Mike, I don't have a city for you. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Homestead, Florida.
Okay. What's on your mind?
So I joined the Army in 1998. I'm still in the Army, 21 years in, and it's amazing, where I started to where I'm at right now. I'm actually getting ready to deploy a 5th time, and it's amazing that most of the people in the military have no idea, and I love them to death because they're part of my team, and that's how we carry on. But we just don't have their information. And I could talk. I mean, just today we did a 9/11 run. Then 24 hours, everybody runs for 15 minutes to kind of commemorate the run. Mm-hmm. But if you talk to anybody about, why we went and the reasons why, they kind of give you these looks where they're like, hey, this is something we had to do, And so
why we went into Iraq, you mean?
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And the amount of people that we lost, the amount of money, I originally joined because I couldn't afford college. And a lot of my friends did the same and they never came back. And so we're going to deal with this stuff way, into the future, into how we were affected by going to war that we really didn't even need to go to. So that's all I wanted to kind of mention. It's amazing, and I thank you for the work that you do because you inform people and the people that listen to your program. I wish a lot more of us soldiers listen to it.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks for your service to our country. But most importantly, thank you for being well informed and for spreading the good word. It's you speak with an authority that most of us lack, and so I really appreciate your calling in and sharing your perspective with us, Mike. Thank you. Glenn in Calamo, Washington. Hey, Glenn, what's up?
Tom, I think I can tell you where Trump got the idea that there were thousands of Muslims on the Jersey side cheering and waving when the towers went down.
Okay.
Let me go on. It's a distortion. Later on during the broadcast day, I don't know if it was NBC or ABC, but somebody had sent in a cell phone video taken from inside a Persian rug store. The store faced the Twin Towers, and the two brothers who were the owners of this store were watching the towers burn. And then when one of them went down, they applauded because it was kind of like watching a building a planned demolition.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them said that one of them happened to mention that something against America, that they had deserved it, that America deserved this. And then immediately that created a lot of hate for the Muslims.
I am guessing that you did not see that you have heard this as a story, because that's the kind of thing
yes,
where...
I did. No, I did see it, Tom.
Because if that actually happened, those brothers' names would be spread far and wide. They would have been vilified by Fox and everybody else.
Right.
I know nothing about
Tom,
this.
And the TV station then immediately sent out reporters along the streets of New Jersey trying to verify that there were other Muslims who were dancing or applauding this story, and they found nothing. As a matter of fact, all the people that they interviewed were actually patriotic American Muslims, and the story kind of went away. That's what happened that day.
So you think that's where Trump got it? Fascinating stuff. Glenn, thank you for the call. Yeah, I got to move along here. Chris in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Chris, what's up?
Hey, Tom, can you hear me?
Yeah, just fine.
When you were going on that riff about the Trump administration curtailing back housing assistance for contractors, you used to always go on riffs about, how conservatives in their most organic sense would bring back Dickens-style workhouses, that you felt like conservatives could erect a legal framework to essentially bring back the workhouses and poorhouses and criminalize homelessness. And I'm just wondering if this could be with these corporations and contractors, if this could really be a modern reality where basically being a vagabond, idle hand, that conservatives could put together a case that, you go to downtown Portland, you see homeless people. If you don't have anywhere to go, if you don't have a job, off to the workhouse. You want to get out of the workhouse?
I think we're already there, Chris. I mean, the 13th Amendment says that the one exception to banning slavery is people who've been convicted of a crime. They can still be held as slaves legally in the United States. And we have private for-profit prisons all over this country where people are working in industries. They're doing work for-profit industries, and they're doing it for nothing, or for 10 cents an hour, or whatever the company decides to pay them, because slavery is still legal if you've been convicted of a crime. So, I think that Trump's idea that we should build internment camps and put homeless people in them is just an extension of that logic. Spot on, Chris. I think you're onto something. Thank you. Thank you for the call. Mike in Palm Beach, Washington. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. This thing about Muslims in New Jersey cheering.
Yeah.
That was in Pakistan. There was a small group in Pakistan that were kind of allied with the
Taliban.
Al-Qaeda,
yeah.
And those were the ones that were cheering. But a lot of other Muslims, specifically in Iran, were holding candlelight vigils.
Yes, they had in downtown Tehran, Iran. The government itself helped support a candlelight vigil in solidarity with the United States.
That's right. That's correct. And Trump is so full of baloney. The guy forgets where he saw that. It was on TV, that some Pakistanis were cheering a week or two after 9/11, and he probably saw that and forgot where he saw it.
Yeah. Yeah, or just, conveniently decided to lie about it in order to trash American Muslims, which is, certainly in his wheelhouse.
Or more likely, Tom, his dementia is showing.
Well, that could be too, but apparently he's been lying like this his whole entire life. I think this was a survival skill that he developed as a kid who, was unwanted by his mother and disliked by his father, and, sent off to military school to get him out of their hair and all this other kind of stuff. Mike, thanks for the call. Bill in Crete, Illinois. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hi, thanks, Tom. Wish I could get the money together to go on the cruise with you next year.
Oh,
just plugging it for you.
It's going to be fun. So what's up?
Yeah. Anyway, isn't there some documentation where instead of Trump going down to ground zero, he was calling into a radio station talking about how now his Trump Tower was the tallest building in Manhattan?
That's right. Now, I don't know if that was like, that morning. That might have been the next day or something like that.
It was the same day, I think. So the question is whether or not he had enough time. If ground zero had been cordoned off, one, how's he going to get down there?
Right.
Two, with all the dust that's going on everywhere, is he even going to bother going down there?
Right.
But it would be nice to find the timeline of when he called in, and that would be proof of exactly where he was.
Yeah, I wonder whose show that was. I wonder if that was Howard Stern's show, or that was or Fox News, or what. I'll have to go back and I'm guessing, Bill, that now that he has built this, he had his speechwriters built it into a speech that he read off a teleprompter this morning, that there's going to be some serious looking at this, for lack of a better word. Bill, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Bill.
Time.
Great to hear from you. I appreciate the call, and spot on. I mean, why Donald Trump feels the need to constantly lie, I think, is rooted in a pathology, a psychopathology that goes back to his childhood, and is very unfortunate. But the dangerous part about it is that he doesn't just lie to the people he works with. He doesn't just lie to the people around him. He doesn't just lie to the American people. He lies to the entire world. He lies to our allies. It's breathtaking, and it's dangerous.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Bush and Cheney were lying to us about Saddam and Iraq. At least they knew it was a lie. They were intentional about it. They constructed it. I don't think Trump even understands when he's lying. And welcome back. Thank you. Sean informs me that Donald Trump made the claim that his building was now the tallest building in Manhattan the afternoon of 9/11 on WOR? WWOR TV. Oh, interesting. So he was not down at 9/11 or down at the Twin Towers trying to do something. Dan in Kansas City, Kansas. Hey, Dan, what's on your mind today?
The reason I called has something to do with what that young man said about serving 5 terms and wondering, why they're having to do that in a war that they didn't have to be in, which connecting the dots goes to why I called is there's not enough concern in America for saving our democracy.
Right.
We had the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and I served in Vietnam, another war we shouldn't have been in.
Yep.
And went on for 10 years. And I'm 70 years old, and I've seen a lot of documentaries about how Hitler came into power, and there's so many parallels about, first of all, the propaganda and the lies. And I've been sitting on the phone listening to you, and that comes up frequently about the lies, and the dangers of the lies. Well, when I watch one of them documentaries and the file footage of the American soldiers going into Auschwitz or one of those concentration camps and taking the German people over there to see what happened, and they questioned this little lady and said, what do you think about, looking over at these stacks of dead Jewish bodies that were emaciated, so I never thought about it before, but most of them starved to death.
Right.
And he said what she said, the words she said, they lied to us. You see what I mean? They lied to us.
Right, the Hitler
Now,
administration.
I was wondering, you mean they lied about killing the Jews or what? No, I think what she meant was when they first started saying Heil Hitler, the propaganda and the lies is the lies she's talking about. The kind of lies we're hearing right now. and we're about to lose our democracy.
Yeah, and we're being told who to hate, and we're being told who to fear, and it's always people of color, and
right.
You know,
the Jewish people, Glasnost, and how all their problems was because of the Jews, and it never connected that it was Wall Street and the Depression and the economic conditions that allowed the Nazi Party to gain strength over the socialist Democrats and the communists.
No, you're right. In large part, it was the Great Depression. It was also, there were a number of things that led to Hitler acquiring power, but it was also the Treaty of Versailles, which John Maynard Keynes said if America signed it, or Britain signed it, actually, he was British. If Britain signed that treaty, he said, this was right after World War I, he said World War II becomes inevitable, and he was right. Dan, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. So every 5 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture comes out with new guidelines, and we just put up a video over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program that talks about how the Trump administration, in this insanely corrupt deal with the $100 billion industry of ultra-processed, high-sugar, high-salt, high-fat foods that is literally killing 700,000 Americans a year, has said, oh, we're going to change the guidelines so that these fast food, high-processed food companies can shovel their stuff into our school lunch programs, into our kids. We're going to change the guidelines so people aren't informed about the importance of, dialing back somewhat on meat and on salt and sugar and all these other things. It's nuts. You can check the whole thing out over at thomhartmann.com. Look for the video for our, the supporters of our program at thomhartmann.com.
Thanks for taking my call, Tom. That call from California was heartbreaking. I don't want to hear anybody claim that the United States is a Christian country so long as there's homelessness and hunger in it. It's time we solve these problems. We're the world's greatest country. We can do this.
I'm with you, Tim. And frankly, in fact, there's an organization that works specifically with homelessness, and they're estimating that the cost to end homelessness in the United States is around $80 billion, $16 billion a year for a few years. And it's not like we don't have the ability to end homelessness. Most other countries, developed countries like ours, don't have a homeless problem. We do. We're unique in this regard. Thank you, Tim, for the call. Taylor in San Francisco. Hey, Taylor, what's up?
Hey, I just wanted to remind you that there's an audio of Trump talking about how his building he owned, 40 Broadway or something,
right,
was now the tallest building because the towers had gone down. I mean, he said that right when it happened.
Well, it was that afternoon, and it was on WWOR TV in New York City, but it was that afternoon. Now, he would probably say, well, that was after I went down there to help out, but nobody's buying that BS.
And just remember, Howard Zinn said, how can you have a war on terror if war itself is terror?
There you go.
That's been our biggest mistake. Thanks.
Yeah. You can't have a war on a technique, on a strategy. Amen, Taylor. Thank you for the call. Margot in East Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Margot, what's up? Or Eastman, Wisconsin. Excuse me.
I can't remember, but were there political shenanigans going on that precipitated people from the Middle East, whoever they were, probably Saudis, but what precipitated the attack? What had we done, or was there something that the public didn't know that caused them to fly planes into the Twin Towers?
Sure. I'd be glad to answer that question, Margot. We do know what happened. It's a matter of public record. Osama bin Laden wrote about it. Part of it was published in the New York Times back in 1999. What bin Laden said was that there were two things that he said he was going to attack America if two things weren't fixed. The first was we had built in Saudi Arabia an Air Force base. It was called the Prince bin Salman Air Force Base, as I recall. And it was to stage our fighter jets that were going into Iraq when we invaded, during the first Gulf War. This was Poppy Bush. This was, after the Reagan administration, Bush Sr. had his little short war with Iraq because they had invaded Kuwait. And he went to the Saudis and said, we need to have an Air Force base in Saudi Arabia to be able to attack Iraq. And the Saudis said, okay, fine. And so they built this Air Force base. And then after the war in Iraq, back in, in the 80s or late 80s, early 90s, I forget what year it was, maybe 91, I think. After that happened, we kept the Air Force base there. And Osama bin Laden was outraged. He was a fundamentalist Muslim. He was, a real purist. And he was outraged that the holy site of Saudi Arabia, that nation considers itself holy in Islam. I mean, they've got Mecca and Medina, the two holiest cities in all of Islam, but they consider the entire country to be sacred soil. And so there were American soldiers on that sacred soil in that Air Force base who were drinking alcohol, watching pornography, and American women soldiers were driving and showing their elbows. And these were all things that Osama bin Laden said were absolutely intolerable. And so, number one, that Air Force base had to be shut down. That was his demand in 1998, 1999. And the second demand was he said that at that time we were paying, as I recall, $35 or $40 a barrel for oil from Saudi Arabia. And he said that he thought Saudi oil should be priced at $100 a barrel or higher, that by paying these lower prices, we were robbing his homeland. And he wanted that fixed as well. Now, what happened after George Bush came to power is George Bush shut down that Air Force base after bin Laden attacked us, because he knew what was going on. He knew why they were, seriously angry with us. And so he shut down the Air Force base. And of course, the price of oil also went up after 9/11 dramatically. So bin Laden got what he wanted. But those were the reasons why bin Laden, according to bin Laden, those were the reasons why he struck America. So thank you for the call, Margot. Great to hear from you. George in Bermuda Dunes, California. Hey, George, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Thanks again for being there. Something just hit me, and I was going to Google it, but I thought I'd call the professor. As I recall, the day of 9/11 in Tehran, Iran, over 1 million people were walking and marching in the streets, including their fire departments, waving American flags in support of America.
That's correct.
Now,
that was downtown Tehran, Iran. It was a candlelight vigil. It was, absolutely. You're absolutely correct.
Thank you so much for your help.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the call, George. Howard in Philadelphia. Howard, we just have 30 seconds here or actually 20 seconds at the end of the show. You got something you want to say real quick?
Yeah, so Trump did brag about his building being the tallest. It was on 9/11. The towers had just crashed, and I shared it with you on the Twitter.
Okay, cool. I'll check it out. Howard, thank you very much for the call. And thanks for being brief. That was good. I'm impressed. Thank you all so much for being with us today. It's been a fascinating day. I think that, we need to be careful what lessons we learn from 9/11. And I think the most important lesson is always beware of any politician who tries to turn a disaster into an opportunity for self-aggrandizement, as Donald Trump did in his speech this morning. That was reprehensible. Anyhow, thanks so much for being with us. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.